Good evening and welcome to the Monday, November 21st Board of Commissioners meeting, special Board of Commissioners meeting, including the public hearing number 2 on the 2017 preliminary budget. First, I'll give a notice of executive session that was held prior in the Powys meeting room, conference room, where we discussed matters of litigation, real estate, and personnel. All members of the Board of Commissioners were present. The next up from our agenda, is the public participation. So at this time, I'll ask if anyone wishes to have some public comment to please come on up now.
I'll start us off if it's okay. I think we should all acknowledge Elaine for the campaign. It was quite an effort. She made herself relevant. She made Radnor relevant. And on a personal level, certainly you have respect and appreciation for it. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And it was fun. I mean, I have no regrets. And I'm glad to be back in Radnor and be able to serve Radnor for another year. And thank you, Radnor, because I did win Radnor.
Dawn, that is very nice of you to say that. I think it's a good sign that maybe we'll continue our efforts at cooperation between our two parties for the balance of the year and for 2017.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, Elaine. All right, any other public comment? Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Maureen McQuiggan. I'm the Director of Curriculum for the Radnor Township School District, and I just wanted to stop by tonight and make a few comments about the public library. I'm reaching out to you tonight to highlight the important role that the Radnor Public Library plays in the lives of our students in the school district. We've worked very closely with the library over the past 6 or 7 years with the leadership of our librarians to not only coordinate our efforts, but also to enhance what the other does. We've worked very carefully to make sure that we're not replicating services and that the services that the librarians in the school district provide are very unique and different from the services our students receive from the public libraries. We've coordinated our purchase of resources to make sure that we're not duplicating things like databases, collection development, and online resources. The public library also offers our students many services that the school district's not often able to provide, such as access to internet and computers after school, places to meet for tutoring or group work with their friends, and also all the outreach that they do with our preschool programs and getting our youngest learners ready for kindergarten. And then, of course, we can't forget the love we all have for the walkable Wayne and the students that are able to walk to the public library right after school. This past summer, we partnered even more closely because of the limitations of space, and we found a lot of wonderful ways to work together, offering book clubs together and supporting the public library and continuing their summer programs for our students. And we have lots of great ideas about doing even more of that in the future, but there really was the noticeable void of not having the physical plant available to house some of the larger and more ongoing things. So I thank you for any consideration you make of this project, and we're happy to support its importance as a school district. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Definitely come up.
Welcome.
Commissioner, Leslie Morgan, Wayne. I said last week that I'm just going to keep talking about this until it's done. So, true to my form, I ran into some people while walking my dog, and they said they like my boards again. And I've heard this through the years. So I have some boards. And my comments tonight may be repetitive from last week, but some people didn't hear them. So I'm glad that we have a very full room tonight about the library. The library is the only project in your Cinderella Pork Ordinance, I believe, that is touched and used as frequently by all 7 wards. So it really is a community project. It is not ward specific or ward slanted. It is a community project, and no other project since I've been sitting in these meetings for 4 or 5 years have been like that. Maybe the Township building or maybe the senior center, if you ever got that. So tonight I wanted to again go through my idea that I circulated even before last week's meeting in an interview on Channel 21, and it was really a way to get the library done without affecting anybody in the community, without affecting our debt levels. And it was a shifting of parts of the Cinderella Pork Ordinance that are at the trails at our Drawson that, as we know through public comment and a lot of commentary, and this is not personal, it's just factual. That was supposed to be privately raised money, $612,000, private and grant money, okay? That's the fact, and I want to commend not only Elaine for a hard-fought match, but also John Nagel, her treasurer, because what I learned is that you both are very good at raising money, okay? And so raising money is hard, but you're very talented at it. And so I still am wondering why that money cannot still be raised for the trails, and I think it can. And I think you see that in communities all around us. They raise private money and grant money together. They don't really tax their citizens for the trails, or they get the state, Governor Wolf, to give them money, okay, if it's that important of a connector. So I think taking the $800,000 from that area and allocating it for the time being, that doesn't mean that in a few years, in 2018 or 2019 or 20, when there's more money raised down there, that we couldn't help the trails that are Drawson out as well. So I looked into because I hike the Willows a lot. How many trails do we have down there currently? And I'd like this to be, can we get this up? I know that's all this is the map that's on our website. And I just want to show the public and the people in the audience that we're not giving up anything by reallocating in a better way. This right here is the area we're talking about. And can we zoom in at all? I don't know. Just keep zooming in. Okay, thank you. So this area here, see these little green and white dots, and that goes all the way over here? Those are the trails we have already down there. Those are the trails we have already down there. And people do use them. People from Newtown Township, people from our township. We have a lot. Now, if we want to double the amount, or I don't even think it's a doubling, but add to those trails, then let's take a pause and see, is that going to A, increase the residential values? Is it B, going to increase some other great thing? Is it going to get a tenant for the empty Willows mansion, or a tenant for the Willows cottage that's empty? That's what I'd like to know as a taxpayer. That's what I think is responsible. But in addition to promising to raise that money privately, it was supposed to be a 2018 project, you guys. That's a ways out. Let's take a pause. It doesn't increase our debt. Pay off the bond on that side early, reallocate it to the library, and go on with life so that the library that touches so many people, and I know that your constituents would back me on this. Certainly trails are popular, but we have trails. We have a lot. Let's take a look again. Look at all the dots, the green dots. And we have a connector here through Brook Farm. A lot of people don't know about the Brook Farm trail because it's not well maintained. And so I will quote Commissioner Schaefer, who said when they introduced the Cinderella Pork Ordinance a year ago, that her duty was to maintain the parks. I totally agree with maintaining. But what you're adding trails here. It's not maintaining, it's adding new trails. And we already have a lot. It's not a big sacrifice. If that's a great idea, don't you think in your heart that A, people will definitely give to that good cause in a place like Radnor, and B, that it can get funded at a future time? I have more, but I think I've said enough. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I don't want to go over 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Mr. President, if I may?
Yes, Bob.
Sure, if I can. Just comments to the last two. First of all, to the library comment, though I know the last two meetings we've heard people from the school district make comments. It's interesting that the school district would make comments. I'm sure everybody realizes the school district takes 72% of the real estate tax dollars. The county takes 15% of the real estate tax dollars, and the township gets 13% of those. I find it interesting that the last two meetings, the representatives of the school district come and support the township giving more of their tax dollars to help fund the library. So I guess it's nice to be able to come and use another taxing entity's money to help support the library without the school district stepping up to help contribute a small function of that. I know Leslie, to her comment here about Cinderella projects, unfortunately, I'll take exception to that because I've never seen Leslie attend one Parks Board meeting over the last several years when the Parks Board's talked about all these projects, all the issues with the Park District. But I guess if there's another motive of why you want to come up here and do things and take shots at all these projects without ever hearing all the Parks Board members and all their hard work and volunteer time to go through these projects and look for funding mechanisms, I guess.
Well, Bob,
If you don't know that, no, Rich, I'm going to talk on this, okay? You can cut me off. You don't cut other people off, but you know what?
Don't attack the constituents.
Excuse me, sir. Sir, I can do that. No, it's not outrageous, sir. When someone stands up there and talks things that aren't true and accurate, I think that's wrong. When someone else can get up there and say things that aren't accurate. No, someone can stand up there and make things about people's times aren't accurate, and then for someone to yell from the audience that it's outrageous to be able to make comments, that's not accurate.
Okay,
that's
Bob,
not fair at all.
Bob, this, I thought you were making a small comment. This is public comment. Let these people talk. Write down your notes. We will get to these discussion points later on in the meeting, okay? So please take a note about what's happening. This is public comment, and let the folks speak, and we'll all have our chance, all right? Okay, thank you.
Since I was personalized out, I did not finish my 5 minutes, and it's very hard to go over because you're always like, oh, 5 minutes. But to Bob's comment, listen, I did not cut up any parks thing. I have been so behind Clem Macron, and that is on the record. I think it's a great project, okay? I think the library is a great project because the center, it's a town asset, okay? And I think that they've gotten a little slapped around because they went over budget in a tight construction market, okay? So I did do some more fact finding. I don't know what about my facts not being correct. I'd be glad to defend my facts, but I forgot this one board, and I think it's important. When John Fisher started talking 4 years ago, Clem Marcone, and then about 15 months ago, got the first Clem Marcone project okayed, okay? It was at 1.2. Then, when hard drawings came in, it got higher, 1.6. Then it went to 1.8, and finally 1.87. That is an increase of over 50%. And I continue to support that project, okay, even though it was over 50%. So if we look at the library's request, and again, this is a township building, so it is a township asset, so you have financial things on your balance sheet. They asked for 2.5. I think round numbers, and I don't know where they stand right now, it's 3.5. That equals $1 million over their first request. That's a plus 40%. So when everybody gets all wowed out that, yes, they are over budget. Part of that reason is because we rushed the bond issue of $8.5 million, so much so that somebody from Carfax resigned that night. And it was at midnight. That's the only reason I call it the Cinderella thing, okay? Because you voted it in at midnight. I played with the little words, okay? And you had a member of your esteemed Carfax, which all of you talk about, resign right at that time because of how you were introducing that and how the projects hadn't been vetted. And we both said, this is going to happen. This is the second project. It is over budget, yes. What are we going to do about it? Let it go dormant like the cottage? Let it go dormant like the mansion so you're in charge, so you guys are responsible for the third building being vacant? Come on now, okay?
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Steve Channinson. I'm from the 5th Ward, Commissioner Nagel. I'm also a member of the Board of Trustees of the Radnor Library. I'm here tonight really to say thank you for the hard work, and I know that this is a tough situation. The board finds itself in a tough situation. But I want to take a moment just to emphasize the importance of this project, of the library in the community, and particularly where it is in the community. I do live in the 5th Ward. I'm not right next door to the library, but I fully support the effort to keep this library exactly where it is. This community has made a commitment to downtown Wayne being the cultural center of this township. It's where the community has invested money and resources into the middle school, and having the middle school near the public library, I think, is something that's very valuable. It's been valuable to my children, and it's well worth the drive across the township for me personally. I think you've heard from a number of residents in this township how important the library is. And I understand, I don't speak here for the board, but I understand the tough choices that have to be made. But I think it's worthwhile to take a step back and understand that we're talking about something that is a long-term investment in the community that does indeed improve the lives of all of us. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Go.
Sarah Pilling, Garrett Avenue, Ward 7. I'm definitely for libraries, but the need for access to libraries has changed. I have a library card for Radnor. I never use it because I can use Ludington, and I would guess that many, many people who live east of 320 go to Ludington rather than going to Radnor. You do not need to go to a library anymore. You can go online and order the book. You can have it delivered to the library of your choice. So even if I went on the line as a Radnor, with a Radnor card, with my Radnor number, I can have that book delivered to it. As a matter of fact, I can read it online. I don't even need a book. So the library in Wayne is being used by some of the township, probably most of the township, but not all of the township. And it's being used for other reasons. I'm going to speak outside the box. You're at a point now where you're not quite sure what you're going to do. It's costing too much. Okay, think. Sell the piece of land that the senior center is on. It's commercial land. You'll get a big bucks for it. And build a library senior center, because it has been proven that when you put seniors and children together, it benefits both of them. I remember the library saying they have 11 part-time staff. How about using some seniors as the readers to the children so you don't have to have as big a staff? Is this a time when Radnor wants to take a really deep breath and think outside the box and not go in a different direction, but incorporate more into it? I think it's something that I would hope that you would at least give a passing thought to. And it's not knocking the library, it's just we're in a different place in our lives now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Michelle Johnson. I live at 503 St. David's Avenue. I'm on the board of the library, and I think that the library is actually a lot more than books. As the mother of 3 young children, one who is with me this evening, it's about community. And I think that you are all very well aware of where it sits in the township and how many people use it. But besides just checking out books, there are seniors that go there every day to read the paper. I've found all of my mom friends by attending the children's story times there. The middle school uses it. It was a topic of conversation at dinner recently with all my family members who live in the township, that they don't know where their kids can be tutored now. I think you need to invest in this project. You need to see the importance of it. The library has done their fair share and even more of raising funds for it. They've been working tirelessly and very, very hard to find donors to contribute to it and thinking outside the box to do so. I think it's very important that the township step up now and really help us fill this gap. It's the center of the community, and it serves much more than just checking out books. People use it for a variety of reasons, and when it's not there, people notice, and I think now people are really starting to notice that the process has been going on for as long as it has. So I just ask that you really try to make an informed decision and help us with this before the end of the year. Thank you.
Phil, do we want to have everybody talk right now, or do you want to have them talk when we go through, or is...
Well, this is public comment, so we're doing it now, and I don't know that they'll come back up again. I think they're making their points here, too. I will say this, that there will be more speaking after this speaker. Maybe we'll take a quick poll and just kind of figure out how many more people wish to speak on this particular subject. But in the meantime, you are welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm Jamie Holt. My wife, Holly, is here with me. I'm in Ward 6 on Darby Paley Road. I'm on the steering committee. We helped raise some of the money for the library. My wife and I are also donors. We made the largest contribution to the library of any charitable organization we have ever made in our lives. So the library is terribly important to us, and we've done our best to make that kind of personal commitment. I've also gone to see some potentially big donors in Radnor, and I've talked to them about the library, and I just want to share with you one thing I've heard. Some of them have said to me, I don't understand why you're passing the hat for a library. Why isn't the township building it? And I do understand some of the reasons, but it's very difficult for me to explain. And several of the donors turned us down because they said, it's a little bit 18th century to have a subscription for a library. Speaking personally, I grew up in Ardmore. Ludington was my home library. My home growing up was a little on the chaotic side, let's say. And so the library was a place where I could go for peace and stability. The librarians there took a lot of care for me when I was a child. They took me to areas in the stacks and showed me books that are still dear to me, some of my best friends. Libraries are not irrelevant. Libraries are more relevant than ever. When I go and visit Ludington today, and I recognize it is a palace and we'll never have anything like that in Radnor, the place is packed. It's humming with activity. And that's what the library in Radnor should be too. It is the heart, I think, of our downtown. I appreciate your consideration of this, and I urge the commissioners to support the library. Thank you.
Thank you. A lot of people are clapping, so you're all on the same persuasion. Are there more people, just by show of hands, who wish to speak on this? 2 or 3. All right. Well, let's just keep our comments within reason and come on up and let's hear you.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome.
Ed Seidel, 203 West Wayne Avenue. I'm also on the library board. I'll make my comments brief because I echo a lot of the other comments, what Leslie said, and a lot of the other people stood up. It's a reminder, right? This is a township building. I think a lot of people brought up, right? It's part of our township. It is the location. All those other things are hugely important. I think we have to look at the change that we're asking to be made, right? Which is going from something like 18,000 square foot and adding 5,000 more, right? Which is a significant change with the overhang and some of the other components, right? There's a lot more space to be used for all the things that I know you've all seen before and the different ways the library is going to be used in the future as a community center. I think you have to be careful of looking at the value proposition of higher estimates does not mean there's less value, right? The estimate process we went through with the township, or the township went through, frankly, right, is part of your steps, right, and all those things. But I think you have to be careful of just saying because if it's higher doesn't mean there's not less value to it. So I think I warn of that. And I think the last thing is we need to prioritize across the township budget and funds, right? What are the priority projects for the township, right? And look at this holistically. And I know some of the commissioners have thought about that before in previous items that are brought up, and look across all the things and get the right money for the right value for the township. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi. My name is Chuck Barber, and I've lived in the I've been in the same property for 37 years. I live in the 2nd Ward, and I'm pushing this table around. I've served a lot of time on different things in the township. I look historically at what the township has done in buying the Willows and surrounds and the expenditures that were made there. And then I look at the $11 million budget for this building, which actually came in a bit more, and there'll be those that argue. Some will say 14 and some will say 18 million for this building, of which very little service to the township occurs here. A lot of service to the people that work here. And aren't we generous that we've spent a large amount of money for those who work for us, who seem to want to attack us too, of course. But those who work for us, we've given them a $11 to $18 million building to work in. And this township then went out and spent $11 million on a piece of property so Elaine could have a nice neighborhood, and many of us who don't live there don't have the luxury of enjoying that. And now I see this township struggling to come up with a library, expending so little funds that they think that they're heroic. My suggestion, if those who don't know about the trail, I was one of the original people on the trail, Friends of Radnor Trail, and we ran into opposition. We did a referendum. And while I'm a Republican, and that every Republican commissioner, except my commissioner, who was Second Ward Commissioner Clint Stunnebeck, was in favor, was not in favor, and signed a letter to try to kill the trail to DVRPC, we put together a group and we censured judges who attacked us. And after a 10-year period, we finally got a trail. We did that through a referendum in which we voted, and out of the 14 precincts here, the only precinct that voted against it was the 7th, one of the 7th Ward precincts. So anyway, 13 out of 14 precincts voted in favor of the trail. The trail cost the township nothing except whatever it was going to cost to maintain. So here's my thing. If you don't have enough money, I suggest that we sell this building. We take that money and build ourselves something for the residents of this township. We, I don't care where Bob works. Hey, he can work. We can put a nice spot somewhere by the railroad tracks. But the important thing is that the board understand that the township needs a new school, needs a new library, and it's up to you to provide it. That was the deal. I do not think it's reasonable for the library board to come up with any funds other than the funds that they raise. I don't think they should take endowment funds, which people gave to the library to run its operation. And I tell you what, if this township can't come up with $7 or $8 million, I would be absolutely shocked. And if we can't, then I suggest that we have a lot of property around Adrossan and the Willows. I mean, you guys can't even build a bridge so that I can take my grandkids fishing. I have to drive in the exit. What are you doing? Wake up. This township wants people to take responsible action. Responsible action is to get an adequate bond issue so we can have an adequate library in this township.
Thank you.
Phil, I'd just like to comment on Chuck has been Chuck and I go back a long time, 80s and 90s. He was really the architect of the comprehensive plan in 1988. Thank you. So we do owe a lot to Chuck's service. But Chuck, I think it's not fair to criticize the manager about the excess space in the building. He'll be the first to tell you that we have more here than we need. And he's been quite creative in trying to find a way to make better use of the building. So that's point number one. Point number two, I think you did have a little bit of a criticism of our buying Ardrossan, but in the $11 million, but in the comprehensive plan of '88 that you were the father of, one of the major elements of the plan was for the township governing bodies to do what they can to acquire the remaining open space in the township. So there's the acquisition of the 71 acres is consistent with that old plan and consistent
I
with
can tell you, Jim, that I and others worked diligently to structure and organize the referendum that provided the funds for that bond issue. Now, 10 years changed, and so did things like this building and other things that burdened the township. So I wasn't as in favor of it 10 or 15 years after that, but we also did a lot of other things. So I wasn't criticizing our township manager for this space because he wasn't here. I criticized him for attacking and trying to belittle one of the residents of this township. That's what I have a problem with. I do not think it is the purview of an employee of us to attack us. You know, it works, and I'm a firm believer that the government, the people select the government doesn't select the people. And I think that when you start to have employees of the township, and I know none of you are employees. I mean, you don't even have enough to cover mail, you know, so none of you are employees, you know, but the employees have a very nice deal both here in the budget in their pensions and everything else. I've talked to the previous librarian, and she said that there's no way, because I said, you're a 501c3, why don't we collapse that and move it into the township? And the reason, she said, is that it's not economical, because she does have a lot of part-time, highly qualified people who do not earn anything like employees of this township. And I mean lower-level employees who earn huge amounts of money compared to what our library staff gets. So I'm not saying take the library on and then end up doubling or tripling your budget. What I'm saying is come up with the money, do a bond issue or whatever you need to do to come up with $7 or $8 million so we can have a decent budget. I'm sorry, I rambled on again, but it's my nature.
That's all I had, Phil.
And if I may just add to that, and if there was an attack made upon Leslie, I apologize to that, but here's the issue, is also too, is I want to defend the work of staff in that, because I know that Parks Board, they work very hard on this, and I know sometimes people will get up and belittle or make comments that the general public may listen to and say, well, yeah, that is like that, and that's where, again, too, it'll be interpretations of that. But you know, I look at the volunteer times in that, and it may be perceived differently, but it's just I look at a lot of times. So attacking anything to do
sure.
with that. What we did was
You need to come up to the top here.
I have that. So
Talk about me without me defending myself in this
Okay, I don't
public
think we
meeting.
need, I don't think we,
and that's fine. Like I said,
I
so.
didn't attack one park. I said we already have a bunch of trails down in Ardrossan, A,
All
that
I
is
was-
true.
okay.
B,
Okay.
I showed a map that is on your website. C, I have already ad nauseum said that there was a business plan created by Commissioner Schaefer that talked and committed to raising that trail money privately. That is a fact. The fact that it didn't get done has nothing to do with me.
Leslie.
I talked about that.
Okay.
That's
Leslie,
it.
I say I apologize to you if to attack you. I'm just trying to defend for other sides. So okay.
And what I'm saying is that we shouldn't have to take money from the park. We shouldn't have to take money from the employees' pension funds. We shouldn't have to rent out portions of this beautiful township building to corporations so that we can save money. What I'm saying is that if we have enough money to support this building and we have enough money to support Androssan and the Willows, even though we can't build a bridge and we let everything deteriorate, then we need to rethink where our priorities are.
okay. Thank you. Thank you. Was there any other public comment? All right. Two more.
Roberta Winters, 326 Williams Road, and I'm speaking for myself. I've loved the library. My children enjoyed it. That's not the issue. I think many times, as I said, this building, it's like a red badge of honor not to increase taxes in Radnor Township. And I think as long as we don't increase the taxes that are sent to this township, the percentage of the property value taxes that we get as a township will continue to get lower and lower and lower as the school district needs get greater and the Delaware County needs gets greater. I see no reason that we can't have an incremental increase in taxes. We don't live in my house on what I earned 2 or 3 years ago. I don't know how the township can continue. I think we're living on permit fees, which are significantly increased above value. But over the long haul, with more and more of our properties being obtaining status of non-taxable, I think we're continuing to deceive ourselves that we need to have property taxes to provide the services and facilities that Radnor Township deserves. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other public comment? No? All right. Well, thank you for your comments. Next on our agenda is number 2. The Wayne Business Association is requesting free parking in downtown Wayne on Saturday after Thanksgiving and Saturdays in December. So we'll ask them to come on.
All right, okay. Always tough meetings, guys, always tough meetings. Hello, Commissioners, how you doing? We're here again to ask for a free parking on Saturdays through December, and starting on Small Business Saturday, which is this Saturday. Very important. This is something the merchants ask us to do every year. They feel it's very important. It helps us compete with King of Prussia and other towns that have free parking. Well, we're King of Prussia where there's free parking. And I hope we could continue this tradition. Do you need any more comment from that? Do we need to vote? Oh, I got a lot of stuff to say, yeah. Well, not that much. I'll keep my 5 minutes, too. We also have Christmas in Wayne coming up. Obviously, Thursday's Thanksgiving, and the holidays are coming up. I think you can cut the tension in the room right here with a knife, but hopefully everything will work out. I want to remember December 2nd, Friday, we got a big day planned, okay? Wonderful. If you've been to North Wayne lately, I just wanted to let you know that PICO, thankfully, have relinquished the work till after the holidays, so the merchants can work without business interruption. So the street is clear. Please come by, okay? It's refreshing and safe and done. They'll continue on the other side of the street next year. But so the second, we have a lot of stuff planned this year. PICO's a sponsor, I think, try to make up for everything. But also, we have a couple other great sponsors. We have the carriage rides again. There are going to be some live reindeer this year. And I'm hoping that they'll stay in their pen and not chase Lieutenant Flanagan down the street after the fire truck leaves. Yeah, no bears. Tree lighting's going to go off at 7:30. A lot of fun at the firehouse for the kids. They get to color ornaments and that kind of stuff. It all starts at 5:30. And hopefully, if we get everything together, thank you, Kevin. But the lights we should hopefully string some lights up and down the street. And Bob, thank you, to make it even brighter and more festive. Okay.
I can add that you can start out that Saturday by running the Elves for the Shelves 5K first thing in the morning, and then head over to the Santa Parade.
Yes. So, but again, I mean, Wayne's happening. It's jumping. A lot of leaves right now, but this wind should take them all through, take it all out.
I'll move the approval of free parking in downtown Wayne on Saturdays after Thanksgiving and Saturdays in December.
Second. Second. Any other public or commissioner discussion?
I'd just like to say I'm fully supportive of this, as I am every year. I want to thank the WBA for all of this arrangement and marketing and trying to get more business in Wayne. It's a more pleasant place to shop. It's a better product. It's a more pleasing holiday experience, and it's in the interest of everyone to spend your money in Radnor, where in the end it comes back to you in terms of a tax reduction. The more money is spent in Radnor, the more we get in taxes, the less you pay in taxes. So it's a win-win situation.
I don't know about that. I think more that you just pay. But
Of the mercantile tax.
yeah, that's right. If it's helpful on Saturdays, we ought to do it throughout the year, right? You know, we shouldn't be collecting. We shouldn't have the tax. I think tax revenue would, and for parking, is we should get that from someplace else or do without it. So I'm for this, but I would say we should have free parking in Wayne every day. So.
Well, I think you know where I work. Feel free to stop by. We could talk.
Well, I'll add a couple of things. First of all, thanks for your service for our community and for the Wayne Business Association. I'll also remind that in September, we passed a resolution supporting Small Business Saturday in Radnor Township. And as a result, the organization that handles Small Business Saturday acknowledges our participation because we sent this to them. And they also gave us some information which I've passed on to you, not the least of which is a placard you can put up on your stops in your stores to show love and shop small. So
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I mean, we've informed our membership of the Small Business Saturdays events and that sort of thing. If they sign up, if you go online under Google Small Business Amex, and you'll see hundreds of local businesses are signed up. And that day, if you're a registered shop, you get double. If you use your Amex there, you get double points or something like that. So,
yeah,
you know, Amex might charge a little more, but they do a lot for small business. I'll give them that.
Great. Is there any other commissioner comment? Is there any other public comment? We'll call the vote. All those in favor of the resolution say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes 7. Oh, passes
John's
6.
got to oppose it,
6
yeah.
to 1.
Well, thank you
Mr.
very
Grinch
much.
over there. Here, let me give you these items here. You can have them too.
Thanks.
Thanks.
I'll just make one more comment if I can, okay, with the library. I apologize to the library because I'm not totally informed and educated in all the issues, but I will say for a vibrant community, it's always been there, and you can actually tell now. Like there's one corner of Wayne right now that's not busy, and obviously because it's closed. So it is important to keep the you got the school there. It's 3 o'clock when those kids walk through. It's usually hilarious. So it's good to see the community active, especially with the kids. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. We'll move on to our next item on the agenda, which is the last item, which is public hearing number 2 on the 2017 preliminary budget. And to start us off, I'm going to ask Bill White just to remind us or let us know of some of the items that we need to really settle tonight or move along onto tonight. And Bill, would you give us that guidance?
Sure. I'll give Jim a second if he could turn my laptop on the screens. Just a quick circle around on the budget calendar. With tonight being November 21st, that means next Monday, the 28th, is the last opportunity to introduce an ordinance and still have it be adopted in time to meet the charter requirement to have a budget adopted no less than 20 days before the end of the year. So we've been gearing up to get to this point so that a week from tonight we can introduce the budget ordinance, which establishes the millage rates for 2017 and the sanitary sewer rate for 2017. So ideally, when we walk out of here tonight, it would be helpful to have the board's direction on how they'd like to see that ordinance set up so that we can make sure that it gets drafted that way and included in the packets in time for next Monday's meeting. In addition to that, some of the other items that we've touched on in the past meetings, in the past public hearings that we may want to circle back on and come to some resolution on, or at least establish as a priority to address in 2017 if more details needed, where we talk about the capital funding. We've already had a discussion here tonight on prioritization. I think that's part of what we need to do with the 2017 piece. And then we also have the long-term approach to the funding plan. We've talked about that beginning with Carfax recommendation and how we want to proceed. In response to the public hearing we had on the 7th, the board had asked the administration to go back into the capital plan and prepare project summaries. We've done that. I apologize that it wasn't ready late last week. We just finished it up today. So that's something that we'll publish and we'll distribute to the board. But it has the entire capital plan along with project summaries for each of the items included in there. And I could step through a little bit of that tonight if we'd like. Some of the other areas that we've touched on also is the pension funding, which was tied to the recommendation with Carfax. We obviously have the library project funding, stormwater fee, the community organization funding, and then finally the allocation of the 2015 excess general fund balance. Ideally, again, because that is closely tied to the 2017 budget and addressing some of the priorities that we know exist. There's also the timeline of those funds need to be transferred before the end of this fiscal year. So targeting the December 12th meeting as the meeting to have that resolution on would be ideal because that'll be the meeting where the budget ordinance would be up for adoption. So if we can walk out tonight having most of this settled, or at least having a plan on addressing some of the larger, more complex issues going into 2017, I think that'd be ideal.
Bill, the capital expenditure project analysis that you did, that was just for the pay-as-you-use projects or for all of the capital projects?
We did it for the entire capital plan. So it has both the pay-as-you-go and the pay-as-you-use.
And you have that for tonight, or you don't?
Well, it's done, but it was completed about 3 hours ago, so it's not something we've had a chance to distribute just yet. So I can go into that tonight, and then we can get it out. And I can touch on as much detail as you'd like tonight, or I can summarize it however you'd like to proceed.
And can I just clarify, the last time we discussed that aspect of this, we did conclude that the pay-as-you-use decision, those items, did not necessarily have to be decided upon for this budget?
Yes, so for 2017, we have options. What has been built into the recommended budget is the use of some of the fund balance in the capital fund, which limits the amount of funding needed for 2017 specifically. We were in the ballpark of about 450,000-ish. That's come down a little bit as a result of some of the changes we've made in the last 2 weeks. So if we could fund the entire capital plan in 2017 by just adding about, I'll say, 350,000. It's 2018 and beyond where that gets a little trickier because we won't have fund balance available to limit the amount of general fund transfers needed. So that buys us a little bit of time.
Okay, that's what I was trying
to get through 17.
And just one more question. Mm-hmm. When you say with an extra 400,000 we could fund the whole capital program for 2017, are you including the pay-as-you-use items that were in the 2017 column? You are?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Bill, I was under the impression that an additional item on this list would be the open space fund, and that needs about $250,000.
Yeah, and you're right. When I was thinking about it, I baked it into the millage rates for next year, since that's part of the same conversation. So to your point, the millage rates would be broken down into two categories. One would be for the operating purposes of the township, and then we do have the voted millage question to balance the park and open space fund. And so both of those would be what millage rates the board would look for next year.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I hope I understand, I believe I understood that, except that embedded in that procedure is an assumption that we don't want to find the funds from something else. So that's always an option. There's always an option that the money can be moved in such a way that we could fund that fund without increasing taxes.
Yes, that is definitely an option. And I apologize if I set this up to lean towards the millage rates. That wasn't the case. It's setting the table saying this is something we should review. And actually, it's something that we've been looking at as well for the last 2 weeks.
Well, Bill, on this list that you provided us with, is there a pecking order in terms of which ones we should probably attack or at least discuss first?
Well, just in my opinion, it seems like the first domino that probably should fall that'll help fill in the rest of the blanks is probably the library. I mean, it's the biggest number out there, and once that's resolved, we can go and fill in the other areas as needed.
Okay. Is there consensus to do that? Sounds good. All right. So who'd like to start the discussion on that?
I'll start off. So my sense is that it would be appropriate to fund the library. It would be appropriate to, I believe that we can find the money, but for me, we have to find that from the list of, from the projects that from the money that we've already approved, meaning, I believe it's speaking to Leslie's point, that I believe we approved that money very quickly, too quickly for me to agree to it. I voted against it. It's not clear to me what is on that list. So I can very easily see myself supporting repurposing that money that was projected to be used for things in the future and using that now to provide it. And we don't have to agree on the exact amount, but in concept to close that gap and fund the library. So
I think it'd be helpful if we can go through, Bill, last meeting we had the people from the library, Helen and Annie came up and went through the different iteration, where we are on the amount approved versus what the total expenditures. I think it would be helpful to go through that again, at least to cover it quickly so that we know what the number is we're looking for. Is that by you? I don't know about by, if they, I didn't really mean to put Helen and Annie on the spot, but just to see what the number in your budget we have, what's the hole that we have there from that, if any? Or you're saying that you're relying on them to give that number?
Yeah, I have the total number that we're looking for. I don't have the detail behind it.
my recollection is it was $1.2 million. So that's the number that, it's my sense, that's the gap that we're trying to close.
Well, if nothing else, I think it'd be helpful to see.
That is the number that includes stormwater management and 10% contingency.
And also includes the library contributions from the...
It includes $600,000 in additional contributions from the library.
In addition to what was...
We had originally...
Because Chuck doesn't want to have any.
Yeah, we had originally pledged to give $900,000 from our endowment, so this would bring us to 1.5, and we will complete the capital campaign. We pledged to raise $1 million, and we are at about 880 now. Yeah, so we will pledge to finish that. So we are at, if we finish the capital campaign, we have 5.4 plus another 600, so that's 6 million. So then the 1.2 is the rest of it.
So, Helen, what is the number if you exclude the stormwater management and you don't include the extra?
It is 800.
800, around 800 even.
800. Yeah.
To put you on the spot, I'm sorry, but it just,
okay.
Can we get the overhead?
Yeah. Do they need to? There we go. There you go. Yeah, the project is 7.150, right? So these are the numbers that I quoted about how much we've raised. So 5.4 million is what we feel comfortable that we have, and then 600,000 is what we're going to pledge additionally, and then 6 million total. So that would mean prior to our contribution, it's this much, but after it's about 800,000 to about 1.2.
And can we have Mr. Kimmel go through and talk about the first two estimates, the first two columns there, and what happened and why? So I see the number. There it is right there, 1,151,900. So that's pretty specific. Is that the number we want it to be?
Yeah, that's including stormwater management and 10% contingency, yes.
Okay.
Keeping in mind that the stormwater management is only 75,000 of that.
About the first two columns there, Martin.
The first two columns, which direction?
To explain the bids coming in so high compared to that.
Okay,
So talk about what it is that 7.1 buys. We want everyone to be clear, if we're not delivering the program that the library board and the administration wants, then we want to talk about that. But if that covers it, we want to talk how we got to that number from what the original number was.
Okay, so I think the library has reported to you that the plan as currently rebid does have everything that's reasonable in their program, and the cuts that have been made to get to that number in scope are cuts that don't damage the operation of the number. And you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's what we've all represented. The original bids came in, quite a bit higher, and we went through a large, really cost-cutting exercise to get to the rebid. And as happens in a severely up market, you're sort of chasing pricing uphill. So we utilized the data from the first bid to decide on what cuts to make. And so we looked to make a little over $2 million worth of cuts in scope, utilizing the actual bid cost per square foot and individual line items as we could discern them. And when we rebid it, we only saved approximately $1 million, $1.2 million, depending on how you look at the bids as they were received and lowest responsible bidder versus the actual low bidder and so on and so forth. At any rate, and so that is the gap that we're now talking about, is there was a substantial cut made that we thought would save about $2 million, and it saved only about $1 million in round numbers. And so this $1.2 million is to close that gap, including making sure we have a safer contingency than what was carried probably in the original budget, just being mindful of a lot of different perspectives about not wanting to have to come back again based on something that we don't know.
Is a 10% contingency normal? I mean, what do you usually do on your projects?
Well, I mean, we recommended a little bit lower than that. But yeah, there are a lot of voices at the table, and I don't object to that as a reasonable contingency. I think you could be more aggressive and expect to survive that. But if you don't have another source, to have that 10% available and hope to not spend it, which is really the goal here, is to have it available, but then to spend as little of it as possible. So I think it's a reasonable contingency, and I definitely think if you can afford to fund it, that's a wise thing to do.
In part, that's because you're looking at an older building and you're not sure what's going to happen when you when you do that.
Because
when you open that up and see what's happening.
It's a renovation.
So there.
Yeah, there's we did ground penetrating radar, and there's stuff under the parking lot that we try to anticipate, but there's stuff, and it's an old building that was built in some curious ways, and we've tried to anticipate all that, but to have that money available. Yes. Oh, there were, I think, all the reasonable tests. We spent as much money in testing and figuring out what was there as would be wise, and then at a certain point you had to say, okay, we think we understand the risk, set aside some money in case there's something that was just not foreseeable, right. And go forward with that.
Now, at our last meeting, we learned, towards the end of our meeting, that the township staff had not really been part of your value engineering process to see where your costs were coming down. Is that a fair statement prior to this point? I think they went ahead and tried to work with you a little bit in this past week. Did they do that?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
How did that turn out?
We had a good meeting with Steve and Bob to just talk about the things that we had done and make sure that they understood what the library had agreed to cut, what we had recommended, the information we had. We looked at some other possible ways to skin the cat, if you will, or it's football season, I'll say, to throw a Hail Mary in a different direction about changing. And in the really short period of time that we've had since then, we've gotten feedback from the contractors that suggests that the other option that we came up with looks to save no more money than what we're already doing, or be so close that to go through that exercise and waste what would be 6 weeks and then have to rebid or have to negotiate in a way that would be difficult to do. I can't stand here and tell you it would be worth it.
What's that other
Thursday,
option?
I thought maybe it would be worth it.
What's that other option? You're talking about the design build option we're talking about, or
No. No. We were talking about, if you recall, there's a large addition that goes over top the parking lot. And then we had two other additions that we took out of the scope. One was the children's story room and one was the teen center. So it was basically to flip that, to build the teen center and build the story room and then not build any of that over the parking lot, which the square footage is a little bit less if you do it the second way, and you would save in the site work costs. But in the world of public bidding, we all sit around a room, that should save another $300,000 at least. And then when you go through with all the different prime contractors and you get what they would charge you to add those two things back in and what they would give you to not add that, the number ends up being, again, effectively a wash. And that was after we talked them into it. They thought it was a negative savings when we first, and this is all this afternoon, so we were all very on the fly with that. So I couldn't stand here in good faith and tell you that if we did that exercise, it would save any of the township's money. It might.
what about the design build option?
And I'll just speak for myself because there was some confusion in terms of what was meant by design build under the township code. And John's sitting here, I think, or no, John's not here for this one. Or there, is he here? No. You have to do low public bid as we're doing it. Goodness knows if we could have done a pure design build, we probably would have done that 2 years ago. But so I think what the option that was being described was really a private developer RFP, where you would set aside a piece of land and go out to developers, not unlike what you did for the Willows and have them sort of build and turnkey something with you. We did talk about that a bit. That would be a very start from scratch process that would be, I think.
Well, you couldn't do a design build at this point because the design is all finished, right? You have a general
On a more
design.
fundamental level, you can't do design build because you can't do design build. You have to do design and then bid and build. So a developer RFP sort of P3 concept, which at one point you would approve that for the Willows, and then you unapproved that, if you recall, to put it as a catering facility. That was a completely different concept of how to basically do a land lease, have somebody build something for you, lease it back to own. My feel personally, professionally, is that it's very late in the Cinderella reference earlier. It's 12 or 11:59. It would be hard to go back to that, in my opinion, but that's not my call.
Mr. President, if I may. We had met with Martin and his firm last Thursday, Steve and I, to go through this and look at options, as the board had directed us to look at options to try to value engineer this a little bit more. Looking at trying to go into this and make changes here, to make significant changes to make up the difference here on this bid here. You're not going to make the significant changes to pick up $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 here. So when we had asked to take off the overhang, looking at this and being involved with a number of public projects and that, to say the least, not being disappointed to say that this didn't pick up $1 million, $1.5 million on the overhang and then put it back in to save somewhere around $600,000, $700,000, but to actually see it come in at $100,000 over was just bizarre to me at best. I know that there's frustration on our part, I think, with the process. I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn or not. I'm sure I'm the library. I think frustration with the architect on this has probably been just as much. design build, to be able to say it's a developer, a developer comes in, that's not how design build works. Design build works is a completely different process where actually the scope and the process is laid out and a contractor comes in and bids on what the library would look at, and it's built and constructed that way, not is what Martin had spelled out to be. So that's not the process that would have been looked at. But as we had spoken about here, and listening to the board at the last budget process here, Jim, if you could bring up Bill's computer here, we had put together a proposal that addresses all these options here of how to fund this project. So if you look at this, I think this is something that addresses what the board may be looking at in regards to the excess fund balance. The Clemba Crone project was committed to $1 million earlier in the year. The Park and Open Space Fund, using this, there's $2.7 million in the excess fund balance, which the board had looked to spend down this year, to put $400,000 to that excess fund balance to balance that fund this year. Also to the capital fund, we would allocate $354,000 to that. The remaining balance is $948,859 for the library building project. We'd put $851,900 from that balance to that, looking for $96,000 additional going to the township's capital budget fund, looking to apply that towards body cameras for the police department. Then a recommendation I would make to make up the difference in the shortfall would be to reallocate bond money from to the library, which I think the board had talked about. So that would be the recommendation, come up to the $1.151,900,000 towards the library. And again, too, this would not require a tax increase, but I think this addresses a number of the issues the board laid out.
So Bob, just so I understand this correctly, the difference between that and the idea that Leslie proposed and the idea that I spoke about would just be reallocating $300,000 from that bond issue.
Correct.
Instead of, and a little bit, I mean, it's, if one wanted to take the fund balance and put it into capital, essentially that's just sort of flushing it, I see this as putting it into capital.
Correct.
Because it's, okay. So
Correct.
Your plan is similar to Leslie's plan, but $300,000 from that list of projects as opposed to the full $1.2 million.
Correct. And in this way, this addresses this. I think this is something we heard from the board and we've been working on for the last 2 weeks that I think addresses a lot of these issues here. So if this is something that the board would consider, I think this addresses the concerns, I think, from the library and the library board, I think, through their process, if this is something that's...
And this solves our pension question for 2017 also.
I believe it does.
Because then we're not, if we're doing this, we're not taking any of the excess funds from that we talked about at the last meeting and putting them into the pension.
That's correct. And then
Bill, you're
I'm in agreement. Yep.
So if we do this, we knock 2 items off the list that you presented to us.
3, because the open space is on there too.
Yes. My hesitation is I'd like to qualify that with the opportunity to come back in 17 and drill back into those issues, just to make sure that from the administration's perspective, we're clear on the direction from the board on how to address capital and pension going forward. I mean, this fixes the problem for 17, but I think the larger issues still are out there.
Can I weigh in on that? So I saw this earlier this week, and I think this is a very good approach. I would, though, plant the seed in everyone's head to think about. I'm not convinced that we need to do the 10% contingent. I would rather do the 5% contingent. And if I were designing this, I would have taken the $300,000 from the bond money, which is from the VU project. That comes from one of the trails, one of the projects that we took money out for that has not had any progress yet. And it's not our own fault, but it has not moved forward. It does not have action behind it now. So it is the one project that we took money out for that is having, is stalled. We may be able to get money for that project from another source eventually. So it's the lowest hanging fruit from the bond issue to take money from. I would love to see the library building project get $551,000 from the excess fund balance, $300,000 from the bond money from the VU trail, and then have that extra money that would be coming out of the excess fund balance then go to the pension fund. I would feel better about that. Get that funded. In my opinion, if we put a 10% contingent fee out there, we spend up to that amount. It's just going to happen. And if the money's there, and if you have a 5% contingent, we may overspend. We may spend over, and there may be things to come up that we didn't anticipate, and then we'll look to find the money. But that happens in projects. It's happened in almost every one of our projects. I'd rather not assume it's going to happen. I'd rather aim for 5% and aim to get there, fund it at $800,000, and then take that extra money we're saving and put it towards the pension. I think this board should continually try to fund that pension every single year.
Is the math correct? I mean, is that if the contingency went from 10 to 5, how much money is it that we're talking about? About how much? So it's about 300,000. Yeah, about 300,000.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that sounds reasonable. I don't know. Nothing jumps out as problematic. I guess I have a different motivation that doesn't necessarily conflict with what Elaine identified. That one of the things I'm going to speak about tonight is we are collecting money faster than we have the capability to spend it. We have a project that is at the spending phase that has that I believe has popular support. And so if we can find ways to, really what we're doing is we're deferring a future expense 3 or 4 years from now that we might have to, 3 or 4 years from now, we might say, wow, that's a great expense. Let's go get the money for it. And we're replacing that with an expense that is very tangible to us, has an element of opportunity cost to us. So to me, it seems prudent. The details of whether it's 800 or 1.1, I'm open to that. I guess I'm more committing to there's a mechanism to complete the project, and I think we should take that action to deliver on that mechanism and complete the project.
So when did this come available? Elaine saw it earlier this week. Today's Monday. So what is she saying?
I have a big dry erase board that's in my office, so that's where I've been charting a lot of this. So if you walk in my office, you're probably going to see it on the dry erase board. So, Rich, if you stop in my office or walk in my office at any time, you can probably see things drawn on my dry erase boards. So you probably see some of this, but this wasn't finalized until yesterday afternoon about 3:30. So you might have saw.
I was watching football. You could have called me.
So you might have saw. The final wasn't done until yesterday afternoon sometime, and then relayed the bill as Jennifer was putting the slide together this afternoon. So, but you would have seen some of these things up there.
Well, people who know me, my wife and others, know that I hate surprises. I hate all surprises, good, bad, or indifferent. Don't like any surprises. This is a surprise.
We could pull this away and maybe
it's a surprise. I mean, it's a surprise, and it's just like, oh, Elaine knows about it. That's funny. What I would say is two things.
I know about.
Well, I don't know what the
Rich.
VU. What is the VU trail portion, and what was that project as an element of the original bond issue? Because we didn't talk about the VU Trail portion, we talked about the Ardrossan Trail portion, right? Because that was to be funded by others. I don't know that it makes a difference, but that's something different. So the VU Trail portion, was that a $300,000 number? And if not, what was that number as contained in the original bond ordinance?
Well, as you know, I'm a big supporter of all the Villanova projects. There was $600,000 for that leg of the project. It was a $300,000 match from Villanova. As the development went on, Villanova came forward to make a change in their plan where they actually put the sidewalk in on the south side of the street, which I believe almost negated the ability to put that section of the phase-in of the project. I think it would have been tough to get Villanova to put up $300,000 towards that part of the trail, which would have been required to go on the north side of that street. And with the change, well, with the bridge going in, and then with them making the changes to the south side and putting that brand new sidewalk in that is actually offset from the road, which is actually was changed, made it wider away from Lancaster Avenue. Almost looking back at it now, almost removes the need for that section of the trail in there, which then provides a good opportunity here to reallocate these funds, and then looking to try to make up this difference in the money here, I think created a good opportunity.
So the answer is that 300 was the number that was...
The $300,000, yes,
so that's
correct.
That's that whole thing.
That's correct.
Here's the thing with the contingency. The contingency is not just like money to be in case they want to change the fixtures or something. This is an old building. This is a building that you're going to be tearing apart substantially. It's not, you can just pick the contingency. You have to plan, because of the nature of this renovation, that you will encounter elements that will push the project beyond what you would have the ability to finish. You could end up, with a major issue, and you need to have 10% in order. I mean, 10% is not even enough. Many projects go over 20, 30, 40% in renovations. And anybody who's worked on the kitchen in an old house will be able to, corroborate that. It's the same principle on an expanded basis. 10% is probably under contingent. And so I don't think I think it's penny wise and pound foolish to think we can just say, oh, forget about it and come back later. It could hamper the progress. It's not prudent to go with 5% on a project like this.
So is there consensus then among the board that this is an option that the board would support to deliver this project in 17?
This, what's up there right now?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So,
Well, I'm also not clear on the open space fund. I don't think that I'm for that piece of it either. I probably would leave that in the fund balance and then put that open space element. This is something you raised last meeting, was we don't have the debt service to cover, we don't have the funds right now to cover the debt service on the bonds, the marginal portion being the Ardrossan purchase. So that needs an appropriation, and I think that this is a short-term fix. I would not be for that $400,000 piece.
So can we hold that debate for maybe later tonight? But for now, what we have is looks like
As it relates to the library.
Yes, $851,000 from the 15 fund balance and $300,000 from the projects previously allocated for the trails identified as VU trail portion. And so the only issue is whether anyone else, I guess I see it as Rich sees it, and prudent to stick with the 10% contingency. If others feel differently, as I see it, the excess fund balance number just comes down by $300,000.
I agree with you, Don, on the 10%. I think we need to get this done, and if that's what's being recommended, then let's do it.
Is there, Bob, appetite or consideration for, I don't want to just split it by virtue of it being half, but making it 7.5% or Certainly 5 is too low. Some folks are talking about 10 being a little high. I think we do need to plan for it and not roll the dice and hope that we work. But is 7.5% or some lower number than 10, does that fit a little bit to give us a little more play, a little more slack?
I agree with Commissioner Booker. I think 10% is, we're running it close at 10%. The only reason why is you do have an older building, and I would hate to run into some issue that you have and then come back to the board later on and then say, well, we need more money. You can't stop the project. You've got to keep moving, and they're under a tight time window now, and you hate to just stop a project and then come back, and then where do we find it from? And then you delay the project, because I think we're going to want to keep moving. And you can, there's a certain point where if not, Martin, I know, is going to make up the difference in money. If it goes over the 10%, we'll hold Martin to that. But I also think that as part of this, the change orders will hold Martin to that.
This wasn't a routine. I didn't.
But I also think, though, that as the project goes along and starts coming to completion, there will be money that there's going to be a certain point, that you can start freeing up some of that contingency money back as we get to certain points along this process. So.
And once our board approves, let's assume that we approve the allocation of that tonight or in our budgeting process. And then there is a need to use that. Will that contingency request come back to us, or will that be embedded in the approval that we would make for the initial allotment? And would it be up to the library board to make that decision?
I think what it would be is, I think the architect would come back and would let the library board know. But I also think, though, that the architect should come back here, and then also too that the release of that coming back.
Is that
so
an
that
issue?
you
Is
make
that
aware.
something that if we approve the full amount with the 10% contingency? So this is a legit question. I don't know the answer to it. Is it practical or impractical for, if you're going to use that contingency, you come to our board to use that contingency?
I mean, I think you might want to come up with a dollar limit, and we can discuss that. I think that's typical in projects that we have authority, like signing authority for a certain amount. But we've always discussed that we would be kind of a team managing
so Martin,
this
you're comfortable with that, some kind of approach?
Yeah.
That's a detail not for tonight. That's a detail for if we approve the money, we would have instructions that you would come up with some mechanism of notice for our board so that we would be involved in the spending of that money.
Yeah, we had talked about coming before the board on a month. Sorry about that. We had talked about coming before the board on a monthly or bi-monthly, every other month basis to do a full report, and that would be an appropriate time to update you on the contingency spending and or request to spend money from that. I'm completely comfortable with answering to you all on that.
All right, so is it time for a motion, Phil, or do you think we need to talk?
Yeah, can I just, before the motion's made, I'd like to say, I can count the votes. Obviously, we're going to have the 10% contingency here, and that's fine. I would love to have a commitment from this board that, to the extent that that is not all used, and that if only 5% is used and there is extra money left over, that we are cognizant that that was excess fund balance money, and that we shortchanged our pension funding this year, and that should go to pension.
We didn't shortchange our pension.
In my mind, we
Our
did.
pension is fully funded every year. It's 100%. It's never been not funded. So as I see it,
It is not
that's
fully
just
funded.
the township's money. Well, very good. That's the township's money, and it just goes back into the coffers, and the township, if 3 years from now or 2 years, we find that we're sitting on $300,000 because the contingency was not necessary, at that time, that's the time for the board to make a decision about what to do with $300,000.
Except this is not general fund money. This is excess fund balance money, which we have consistently had a policy of using towards capital and pension and...
Right, but we have no policy in place now because it expired, so we're going to set that policy tonight. And my sense is that tonight, what we do is we approve, for all intents and purposes, 100% of the funds necessary for the library. And then if 2 years from now there are excess funds left over, then they just become part of the pot that we make a decision about at that time.
Well, that I'm uncomfortable with. It's not general fund money, and it shouldn't go into the general fund if it's not used. if you want to make the commitment that it goes back into an excess fund balance pot, that's how we would spend the money.
That's the understanding, that it's part of an excess fund balance pot, and it would go back into the excess fund balance, and then it would be used, but however the board decides is the most prudent way to use $300,000.
Which we should have a policy about, and we usually do. That our policy lapsed, shouldn't govern the way we decide to use that money. We have always had a policy, and we should have a policy.
If I could jump in just real quick, just the policy, the fund balance policy on the books right now gives the board discretion on an annual basis on how to allocate excess fund balance. It provides guidance that unfunded liabilities and capital are at the top of the list, but then there's the catch-all that gives the board the overriding authority on how to allocate those funds. So capital, pension are both qualifying uses for the excess fund balance.
And just so people who are watching at home know what we're talking about, at one time we had a formula, and that formula included the specifics. That's the part that we don't have. I don't agree with the assumption that we've always had it and it's always been that way. The policy we have now is, to me, the prudent policy of we'll look at what we have and we'll make the best decision. This is the best decision of the fund balance for this year. If we had been obligated to not make that 2 years ago, we would be making a bad decision right now. So to me, that policy of it's in the fund balance, and when it becomes available, we'll make a decision is the best way to proceed.
I wouldn't mind discussing this stormwater issue. I know it's only $75,000, but if you want to cut some money out, maybe that's something that this board would give on. I got to admit, I think that the stormwater $75,000 was way short because you're basically redoing that pipe in the middle of the parking lot. But if you want to go through and talk about that stormwater to see if they want to give you a waiver, that might be something else to talk about.
Steve, the stormwater, there's no regulatory requirement. There's no waiver. This is all discretionary money spent on stormwater.
The waiver in the sense of, do you want to do it or not?
There's no requirement. This is all...
Well, we have an ordinance that the township in its own projects does not have to adhere to these items. And I'm going to let Roger go further, but basically when the infiltration testing was done, there's no infiltration. So it's solely rate control for this project. The only thing that really came to light was that this is a hot spot, if you will, for stormwater. And the thought moving forward was to do what you could do, to do something in this regard to that area. If you might remember, Dan Weibel many months ago put up a slide that actually showed the parking lot as part of a larger potential system that would connect with the South Lane parking lot.
I don't think we can very well ask our taxpayers and our developers and residents to religiously follow our stormwater ordinance if we, as a sovereign, do not follow it ourselves. So you can call it...
This is in a particularly very, very,
it's a terrible
very
area.
tough area.
In front of the
stormwater.
firehouse, this is just 1.5 block away. And as to the debate between Don and Elaine about the pension set-aside, when I joined the board in January of 2012, there was a raging debate of, we had many people that came into our meetings and criticized our board for having this huge unfunded pension liability out there that's from now until 50 years hence, and a huge insurance and OPEB, other post-employment benefit obligations. So we may have an expired policy, but I think we should really be very cautious about, I think we should re-implement the policy and make sure that we continue our dedication to putting aside money for future pension and OPEB liabilities.
Mr. President, if I may just briefly, on the stormwater issue, I know that at the last meeting, you saw Dan Weibel talk about the potential system that he talked about going down the driveway to the library. I would hate to see us have the library pave this lot and do all that, and then we come back and we talk about stormwater management going down, in through that area. When we build it, we put all this nice driveway, and then all of a sudden we come back a year later and we tear it all up and we do stormwater management. I would think that we would want to maybe waive that requirement, and then when we decide what we're going to do in that area, make that, if we're going to make that fix, we incorporate that all into at the same time. So I think in the bigger plan of that whole area, which we know we have to address, I think it would be the appropriate time where we incorporate that stormwater management. And I think Martin could probably speak to that. We're only talking a very small area, and I think we want to look at the bigger picture. So I think for the $75,000, we might want to save that and incorporate it into the bigger solution into that area that I think the board is being presented with. And that's, I think, goes to justify that stormwater management plan that is actually being presented now. So that's just my thought on it.
Interesting point. Does that have to be decided tonight?
Well, I think you're probably going to see a bid award coming very shortly here.
It would be ideal to decide it tonight because it impacts the awarding of the bid. I think we had that as an alternate, which is why we know the precise number. So the latest it would have to be decided would be at the night of the go, no-go to award the bids. To Bob's comment, yeah, I think the system that we're putting in is doing very little compared to what a more thoughtful system in the South Wayne lot might do, which was why originally it was not in the scope. And it really only got added very late in the project when we went through some last-minute meetings with various commissions, and folks decided that we had to do something. So I would agree with what Bob just said, is if all things were equal, I would save that 75 to contribute to a better, smarter stormwater management plan in the not-too-distant future.
Go ahead. Well, that's only relevant if the South Wayne lot stormwater system rises as a priority and happens in the next 2, 3, 4 years, which is a big if, because there were a lot of things on that list.
And one of my concerns is that it sounds like for a relatively small amount of money, we would set aside the potential to do a very small amount of good with the possibility of more good in the future. But it's been very difficult for us to agree, for the community, not just the 7 of us, on what is a good project. So part of my concern would be that we would set that aside and it would become a giant Achilles heel in your attempts to build the library. It would get in the way of, we just, as a community, wouldn't figure out how to best incorporate the two designs. So my inclination is, I guess, similar to Jim's, that all things considered, no solution is perfect. And Martin, you would agree that if we proceed with it, we have clarity, meaning you know how you would use it. There's no uncertainty there.
That's correct. It's fully designed and documented.
Yeah, so my sense is that we include it and we proceed with the project that resembles what Bob has presented to us.
There is no world in which our moving forward on a bigger project in South Wayne is on their schedule.
Yes. That's right.
That's never happening. So we're going to have to go back and dig up driveway anyway.
So is it time for motions?
It's time for a motion.
Okay, so I'll move that the spirit of this would be a motion that the budget reflect using $851,900 from the 15 excess fund balance and $300,000 from the bond money VU trail reallocation to the library to fund the library project.
Second.
Okay. Any other commissioner comment?
I just want to note, that actually moving the bond money to another use like this is going to require, John Rice is not here.
Yeah,
but
we already know that we're allowed to do that.
We're allowed.
Right.
In
it's not just happening tonight.
Yes. But in 17, the budget will reflect this, and then there will be an 8-week process in 17 in which that money, the steps necessary to allocate.
We'll repurpose the bonds. It'll be just one meeting, right?
I think it's an ordinance.
Excuse me, it'll probably require an ordinance, so it may be 2 meetings.
All right.
But it's something that can happen within a 2-meeting.
One of the things we never talked about, though, was Ms. Morgan's point was that the bond reallocation should be from the Ardrossan trails, right? And so so this would preserve the Ardrossan trails and not address the issue raised by Ms. Morgan, which was that portion of the project had originally intended to be funded by others. So I just want to, is that your understanding of it?
Well, first of all, there was never a promise to fund it by others. We keep saying that, and it is not true. There was...
It's in the documents, though.
There was a commitment to attempt to raise money. So...
Was there an attempt ever made?
Yes, the attempt was made. Anyway, personally, my objection is that I really think we should go ahead and put in enforce the millage for the open space. When we passed that bond, and in fact, when we did the CPR effort and the big vote we had, it was inherent in all of those that taxes would pay for this. It was never, the first 10 million we did years ago, there was no discussion of that. And Bill Spengler was successful in passing that ordinance about the transfer tax. But on this, we were always clear that taxes were going to be increased for this. And it's got a sunset provision. It's very good. We've been fortunate enough not to have to do it because we had excess funds. But now I think is the time, and then that would free up that 300,000 we're talking about taking out of that.
But no action. The motion that I presented is silent to how we're funding the Park and Open Space Fund.
Yeah, we'll address that one next.
But that's so it's just the bottom two items that motion said that we're going to use $851,900 from the 15 fund balance and $300,000 from the bond money VU trail portion.
Yes, and if we go with the millage to cover the Park and Open Space Fund, that 400 could be.
But you still have to go with the millage for the Park and Open Space Fund.
Yeah.
So it's not freeing anything. That's a negative 400.
That's 400 that people are saying today is available.
No, it's the opposite, right, Bill? It's 400 that we have to fund.
No.
The Park and Open Space Fund will need $400,000 in 2017 to make the necessary debt payments.
Later tonight, we're going to have to find $400,000 for that fund.
Yes.
Right. So it isn't like we're not freeing money from it to use for this project. We still have to find that $400,000 later tonight.
I just want to address Rich's point about why we would use the VU trail portion as opposed to the Ardrossan. When we passed the bond, there were 17 projects on that list. Of those 17 projects, 2 or 3 have made really significant progress. One is Clemacrone. 2 is the extension of the Radnor Trail, and 3 is Ardrossan. Those are the 3 projects that have really gotten the biggest legs, had the most meetings, have had the most progress. This particular project, VU, is the bottom of that list. It has not gotten legs. We have a difficult partnership that has not worked out yet, and will someday work out, hopefully. But we have not made progress. There have not been meetings. We've literally made no headway. So it is, as Don reflected, an opportunity to put money into a project that's ripe and ready now, and hold off for tomorrow a project that we're still working on and has not progressed.
And I understand that, and I recognize the issue, but out of the other list of projects, we're bound to be over budget on some of them. And my big trail, the one trail I care about in Radnor right now is from Radnor Nature Preserve to Harford. Okay, we have to get that, and Steve and I and others we've been working on this for 2 years. That's the most important trail that we open up that land that we gave away, that easement and that right we gave away to Bentley some time ago for his 2 homes back there. So we need to replace that. That's the only trail that I'm working on right now. Now, Ms. Morgan's point was this is where the fund should come from, irrespective of, and I recognize that this VU trail seems to be not necessary, but that's not the point. The point is that that money could be held and reserved for any of these other projects that go over, we need not identify it here. I sense that, at least as this came to me, that there was a kind of a, that wasn't pecuniary, there was a type of purpose to calling it what it was, which was this was in place of this project, not just what project fell off. So I saw some reason, some rationale to it. I would like to know, John, if people did try to raise the 600, and I've seen the documents. I don't know why you and Mr. Higgins or Commissioner Higgins keep saying that it wasn't. It was definitely in the plans. I've seen it in the plans. There was $1 million to be raised for trails and for purchase. None of it has been raised. It's been the subject of quite a bit of discussion in the township. Why is it that we would not hold true to the original intent and allocate portion of that money and leave this 300 for VU for other things that might come up in the future? And if Leslie wants to talk some more too about it, I'm happy to hear. But you and
this is Commissioner
provide some kind of background on why you think it shouldn't be used, because I don't see it.
Because the VU trail is not progressing, whereas the Ardrossan Trail is.
But that wasn't the issue. The issue was the lack of funding that was originally promised.
You're entirely misinterpreting what was said.
Yeah. Our board did not promise it.
No.
It was the Radnor Conservancy and other groups that said they would try to raise it, and they've raised $40,000.
That's just not my understanding. I don't.
Well, then your understanding is incorrect.
Well, my understanding was based on the documents that are on the website for Radnor Township right now, which says that these will be this amount will be raised. So,
I think another area where there was a shortfall was, did we not apply for a grant from Delaware County?
Yeah,
$500,000, and maybe that's what you're thinking of. We tried.
No,
we tried
it's
for
not
that,
what I'm thinking of.
And Delaware County did not come through with that money.
Phil.
So anyway, we have a motion on the floor.
Wait, can Leslie explain?
No, hold on a second. We have a motion on the table. Is there any more commissioner comment? Okay, if seeing none, if there's any public comment, then this is the time. Thank you.
Yeah, I was briefed tonight. I know a lot of history, and so when people tell me, like, that you go to Delaware County and there was no money for Delaware County, I call Delaware County. I do my homework, okay? I called commissioners down there, whatever they call themselves. They recalled your meeting. You came once. I didn't want to bring this up tonight, but I will now. And from them, verbatim, they said you came to a meeting with another past commissioner, Commissioner Nagel, Commissioner Schaefer. You were, and I quote them, woefully unprepared. A. B. Didn't even know the purchase price at the time. But they were very polite to you. They asked you a list of questions that you left with a list of questions. They invited you back, and you never rescheduled a meeting with the answer to the questions that they required to make a decision. They like to look at these projects, they said. They do fund some of these projects. This one, they never heard from you again. I know that I issued a FOIA, and there was a 2-sentence letter from Bob months later that said, we formally request these funds. But you never came back to the meeting. There was a laundry list of questions. That's what they told me. Thank you.
Well, then you were lied to, quite frankly. And we'll bring Hank in.
All right.
He can testify.
Let's call the vote. And the motion is, Don, restate it, please.
The motion is to use $851,900 from the fund balance and to repurpose $300,000 from the bond money allocated for VU trail portion, reallocate it to the library.
All right, we'll call the question. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Passes 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're very humbled by this, and we greatly appreciate your support and the support of Township staff. Just a question about protocol. Do we introduce our contracts at the next? Does it take 2 meetings for the contracts, or so what do we do? Well, I guess we can talk about it.
Yeah, just work that
Yeah.
offline with Steve.
Okay. All right.
I'm going to vote no against for the repurposing of the bonds if it says VU Trail, so.
We'll give a minute for folks to leave, but Bill White, we look like we've taken the biggest of the challenges for the moment. Which one do you suggest is our next item to consider?
Probably the Park and Open Space and Capital Fund, the other 2 items on that distribution list.
All right, we'll have, which one do you want to do first? Do we have a sense of which one you'd like to do first? Park and Open Space Fund and the Capital Fund?
Are you talking to Bill?
No, talking to us, talking to us. Let's do the Park and Open Space Fund.
Okay.
All right? Okay. Anyone want to comment on that at the moment?
The issue in front of us is whether we want to have a millage increase to pay for the shortfall and raise the approximately $400,000 deficit, or whether we would like to take it out of the excess fund balance as proposed by the staff.
I mean, so my little dilemma is I think that was not a good use of township money. But as John said a moment ago, you all made it very clear that you wanted to raise taxes to do it. So I have things that I believe are township priorities, that if you use that money to satisfy this priority, then that's coming out of something else that's important. So my opinion is that you have to raise taxes to do this, because that's the commitment that you made to the voters when you approved this.
I would like to recharacterize that, because as you know, I was very integrally involved in that, and there was never a promise made to raise taxes. The way that it was put forward is that we were very upfront in setting forth that taking the open space fund going forward and what we take in and what we would have to put out with all of our open space bond issues, not just this one, there would be a deficit starting in 2015 or 2016 until the year 2026, when one of the bonds became paid off. And we said, to cover that deficit, it is possible that we will have a tax increase unless we can find some other source for the funds. Knowing full and well, the last time that we had a bond issue, it was possible that we would have to have a tax increase for it, but we found another way to pay for those payments through the real estate transfer tax. So, as someone here tonight said, for the last 2 years, we've been lucky because we've had another source to pay for that deficit. And in my opinion, we're lucky this year. We have another source to pay for that deficit. I'd love it if we were lucky until 2026, when there will be a steep reduction in these step payments because one of the prior open space issues will be paid off. I don't think that's realistic, but you never know. And for all of the years that we're lucky, I'd like to avoid having a tax increase, because I don't want to increase taxes on our residents.
Right. But at no point during that process did anyone ever say that what we will do is we will fund the purchase of our Drossen by taking money out of the capital account or by taking money out of the pension account. Just moments ago, you talked about how valuable it was to put money in the pension fund. And now you're telling us it's more important to not raise taxes to purchase the 10 acres that we purchased 3 or 4 years ago. The characterization of promising the fund balance, I believe John said that less than 7 minutes ago. So I think it's an accurate portrayal. And if you use the money from the fund balance to do this. You're essentially using our capital money, which is underfunded. That's one of the things that we've learned. Or not underfunded, which we have determined that we need to put more money in capital. Or you're stopping us from spending that money on something that is an equal priority or greater priority.
Except that what you're not considering is, this is a capital expense. This is, the ultimate capital is land.
Well, but it's not. This is a debt service payment.
For capital.
The characterization now has changed, right? It is now a debt service payment, so it's not a capital payment.
And it was never presented as we'll just pave less roads in 17, or we won't we won't make improvements to buildings in 17, or we won't make other park projects in 17. This was presented as, if we have to do it, we will raise taxes, and it fell on a 4-3 vote. And now what you're doing is you're trading off other priorities. You're trading off our capital plan, which we have heard from the staff needs millions of dollars over the next just 3 or 4 years, is my understanding. You're trading that for a decision that you made in 14. So I think you're shortchanging one part of the program or one part of the township to pay off a decision that you made in 14.
No one is getting shortchanged. There's enough money in the excess balance, in the excess fund balance this year to fully fund the 2017 capital plan.
Yeah, and I want to take that fund balance and put it into the capital plan to fund in 18, 19, and beyond. And if we follow your proposal, then we will be either cutting something else in 18. Something won't get built. Something that we presumably need won't get built because you're taking the money that we would otherwise put into capital projects and putting it in to pay off debt service from the 14 purchase.
If you are advocating for raising taxes, then that is your prerogative. I disagree. I think in this situation it's more appropriate to use that excess fund balance toward making this deficit payment. And I would rather not raise taxes. It is totally your prerogative if you prefer to raise taxes.
No, I prefer not to raise taxes. That's exactly the point, is that we're not going to vote. I'm not going to vote to raise taxes.
And what we think is going to happen if we follow your plan is that you will then raise taxes to spend on capital projects. So my way of preventing you from raising taxes to spend on capital projects is to use the fund balance, as much of it as we can, to pay off those capital funds.
And I think it's fair.
There's no tax increase suggested for capital projects. So the only tax increase we're talking about here is for Park and Open Space Fund, for which there is enough money in our fund balance, and I am proposing that we use that money and not raise any taxes. Let's be clear about that.
You're just deferring that from 18, 19, and 20. And
you don't know what's going to happen in 18, 19,
but we do.
And
we
20.
have a plan. And it's been presented to us, and it was presented that there is a shortage, that there's not enough money to do the things that the staff has identified that it's recommending that we do. And so this plan diverts money from capital to pay the debt service on the purchase of our Drossen. Whether we raise taxes to do it is sort of not the purpose of what I want to make clear is that that's what you are doing. This isn't, look how financially responsible we are, we're not raising taxes. This is, you're taking money out of the capital plan in 18, 19, and 20 in order to fund the debt service.
Fund a capital purchase, of capital acquisition that it adds value to our balance sheet. Yes.
Again, it's not the fund of capital purchase. The purchase is made. This is a debt service payment. It's not
paying for our capital asset.
It's that the capital asset is purchased. The character has changed. It's no longer an asset.
Something is going to be not built if we follow your plan.
Don's actually right. Is absolutely right. This is money is fungible, but the point is, that $400,000 is better utilized, even if it sits in the fund balance as a rainy day fund. It's better utilized there. The majority of the board made a point of paying for our Drossen and figuring out how to pay for it later. Now is the time when you need to figure out how you're going to pay for it. And as John had said, it was intent. It would be a tax increase, and that's what you all agree. That's what you all wanted to do. You made a point of saying, we went out to the electors. We had them vote on it. They said to go ahead and do it. So we feel justified in raising taxes. So go ahead and do it. Don't deflect and spin to make it sound like Don is trying to have a tax increase. This is your tax increase, Elaine.
Let me interject a question to Bill. Bill, two things. One, if we do this or don't do this, however we handle it this year, are we faced with the same situation next year? Yes. Is it going to be the same shortfall of the debt service for next year?
In the Park and Open Space Fund?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the only way that would not occur is if there's an unexpected surge in the realty transfer tax again.
Right. And
which,
you're not forecasting that.
Yeah, I don't know who would.
Right. No, of course. Okay. So we're going to face it again. This is a one-time fix in this case.
Yeah, if we were to transfer that 400,000, it would be for 17 only. We would be back here a year from now having the same discussion on how to
And the only
address
other way
18.
we're going to get money for that, cover it next time, is if there is a big boost in the realty tax, transfer tax.
Yeah,
That's the only source.
without
That's the only real
identifying
source.
another source,
Right.
that would be right. 'Cause-
And what would this mean? Can you calculate this in terms of dollars for an average resident? How would you characterize?
Before you do that, I would also, I think at this point, the original millage increase that we talked about was too high.
Yes.
Yes.
We had
So I don't know
yes.
that we know the millage that would be necessary if we,
Well,
or maybe if you figured it out.
I
But
have a calculator on my computer that we can look at, but it looks like the original discussions included a millage adjustment of 0.15 mils. 0.10 is probably closer to what would be necessary. And sorry, again, this is live TV.
Emergency millage update from someone? Is that
No.
what that was?
That is, my son's playing a hockey game right now, so I'm getting updates from my wife. So, that's something we could take a look at. And again, those numbers can be adjusted annually based on the assessed value of the township and how that adjusts over the time. So,
I don't see anything wrong with moving money from one account into another. Basically, that's what we're doing here, if we can avoid raising taxes. And I don't think it's a valid argument to say that in 2017 and 2018, we're going to sacrifice a project. That's pure speculation. We all ought to be mindful of what's going on in our neighboring township at Lower Merion. Lower Merion Board of Commissioners, or school directors, are in a huge fight with taxpayers. There's a case now on appeal to the Commonwealth Court, and the gist of the case is that the school directors have overtaxed the populace and had money in the bank, had money in accounts that they could have spent and used on expenses. Instead, they raised taxes. So here, I see us being possibly vulnerable to somebody claiming that, look, you've got money in these accounts, you should be using it and not raising our taxes. So I'm quite comfortable with the approach of what Elaine is advocating. And we have to remember that we make many assumptions in our budget. Bill White's drafting is clear that this is what we're assuming for 2017. And maybe in 2017, latter half, in 2018, the economy will go booming and we'll have a huge increase in income, in revenues. So I don't think it's proper to say that we're putting ourselves in a vulnerable position and we won't have money for specific projects a year or 2 years or 3 years down the road.
We will have less, though. So the part of what you said that I have to take issue with is I'm not saying that I want to hold on to that money. I'm saying I want to spend it, but I want to spend it on capital projects. But if we follow your plan, we will spend it on capital projects and debt service. So the issue isn't, are we going to spend it? The issue is, what are we going to spend it on? Do we want to spend it on capital or capital and debt service? Your option is capital and debt service. My option is capital.
Also, I would say, as a former school director and someone who's very much dialed into the case you referred to, for school districts, they have certain limitations on how much they can increase taxes under Act 1. And they have certain exceptions that they need to apply for every year, and they have a maximum fund balance of unrestricted fund balance of 8%. So in the case of Lower Merion, they were exceeding their maximum fund balance and calling for all of the exceptions from the limitation, or certain exceptions from the limitation that otherwise they would be subject to. That is what caused the problem for Lower Merion Township School District, and that would never be the case here. This is not at all similar and is not applicable.
And I'd like to just note that, the argument that paying for Ardrossan without raising taxes, taking it out of our excess fund balance, just this little deficit, is precluding us from some other project, some other place, and that's a bad thing. That's a value-driven comparison. And I know there are several people on this board who never liked that project, didn't think we should do it. We have some very eloquent and persistent residents who never liked that project and are consistent and come and talk about it a lot. But I will remind you that 79% of our community wanted this project, that it has been, the preservation of a portion of this land was in every single one of our planning documents from the very beginning of when this township did planning. And this is a project and a preservation project that had the wide support of many and continues to. So making the value judgment that taking money that from this excess fund balance to pay for this is somehow degrading our community because now we're not going to be able to spend on something else. It's just it doesn't ring true to many people who have found then and find now that the preservation of this land is very important to this community, are happy that we did it, and are happy to see it move forward.
On board with the value part. That part I agree with. Certainly it's a discretionary choice, and it was made in a fair democratic process. My objection is in large part to how you are characterizing it. I was part of the process. I voted against it. I don't remember the funding mechanism being we will defer capital projects. So to me, in order to be consistent, to me it's inappropriate for you this board to defer capital projects in order to meet debt service, because that was not what.
And I will remind you that as of tonight, we are not deferring any capital project.
Well, that's the part that I can't accept that as accurate. We have a long list of projects that require funding and a noted shortfall. So the shortfall just becomes that much larger. So something will go unbuilt if we proceed the way that you've decided to proceed.
I think we've both made our points, and we can agree to disagree.
And in addition, it's current projects that will be deferred, not even future projects under the capital plan, as I would argue. And finally, with respect to the Ardrossan electoral debt, the referendum in 2006 was in no way specific as to the Ardrossan purchase. That purchase was widely not supported, and there was never an opportunity for the populace to once again weigh in on that specific portion, or that specific purchase. And what we in fact did was we handed $11 million over to a wealthy developer to subsidize his project. It was a very bad deal, and it was never put to the vote. And if you would have bought the entire Ardrossan 300 acres for $20 million, then perhaps you would have an argument. But as it is, your argument that was approved by the electors doesn't hold water.
I'm going to ask that commissioners who have not spoken to speak for a few moments on this issue.
No, I've got nothing new to say. Let's get a motion and
Okay,
vote on it.
Jim, have you spoken on it? I don't remember. Have you spoken on this issue?
You have a short memory.
Okay, maybe so.
Yes, I have spoken.
Okay.
Yes, he did.
And John, have you spoken?
I started it.
Okay, very good.
All right, then I'd like to move.
Well, I like to say something.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. I often don't, but this one I do. And that is this. I'm really moved by three parts of this decision. The first part is like everyone else up here, I'm not enthusiastic about adding taxes, increases, which is why I still would like to get the answer from that bill as to what your proposal really would be in terms of what the real millage increase would be, and what might that mean for an average household. I think we need to know that. I think it's appropriate that we understand that. But the second is that I'm also moved by a philosophy, so to speak, that has been given to me by my predecessor. I remember he espoused this when he was on this board, John Fisher, and I've also been spoken to by many other residents who have spoken this on occasion, not in this particular instance, but in general, who have said, you know what, increases of taxes in any shape or form, millage for any reason, is an inevitable thing that's going to happen. Please do not give me a giant increase because you held off on everything and putting anything together for 5, 6, or 7 or more years. I'd rather take small incremental uses, just like my regular cost of living would be, that I can plan on or justify, rather than get hit by one large tax bill because we ran out of capital money to handle some emergency capital things or for whatever reason. So that's in the mix too. And the third is that I do know that I've seen the list, that there is an excess of capital projects that are sitting in the queue. They're not on this budget because we know we don't have the money for them. It's not because we don't know they're there, and that we would have to go ahead at some point. So I'm struck by the fact that we're going to face this problem again next year. So this is not a let's handle it. Let's weather this storm and we'll be okay for the next 5 years. This is something that we need to face right now. And a decision by prior boards was that we would allow ourselves to have any kind of a small tax increase or something to cover this. And I think we do have to worry about paying as we go rather than pushing everything off. So I've given Bill a little bit of time while I've talked to see if he can come up with that answer. But how are you making out, Bill?
I'm ready to go.
Great. Tell us.
So, Jim, if you could turn the projectors back on. Good, so we can't see anything. So this is the forecast spreadsheet that was prepared back in late 2013 and used in 14 then when the purchase was ultimately made, when we were forecasting out all the activity in the fund. The lightly blue shaded section has all of our obligations. We have the old open space issue, and that's the one that will mature in 2026. So that's the one that falls off beginning in 2027. We have the new Series 2014, which is the Ardrossan purchase. And then, if you'll recall, we used a small amount of funds from the general fund to keep the borrowing as bank qualified to make it a little bit more affordable or lower interest rates. So that's the open space fund paying the general fund back. All that being said, the primary source of income then is the annual realty transfer, and I'll blow it up a little bit. And you can see we had 2 good years bookend what would be considered an average year in revenue, which is what allowed us to hold off in prior years. 2016 has been a little bit closer to normal. Even now we're projecting a pretty sizable increase for next year. That's important because it dictates how much revenue we might need to generate in order to avoid going into a negative fund balance, which we cannot do. There's got to be cash in the fund to make those debt payments. So what I've plugged in here now at $317,000 is a 0.10 mil estimate. That brings the fund balance, if everything happens exactly as predicted here, if we get $750,000 on the button next year in revenue, from the realty transfer tax. We'll end with roughly $50,000 in cash in that fund at the end of 17. That gives us a little wiggle room for the realty transfer tax to miss that $750,000 target. Not much, but that's why the original recommendation was $400,000 from the excess fund balance, was to just put in a little bit more buffer in the estimated ending fund balance for 17, just in case the realty transfer tax revenues miss their mark a little bit more significantly. But at 0.10 mils, it generates roughly $317,000. And when we get into how much that might cost the average taxpayer, for the average valued home, roughly $36 and some change for the year. For the median, 26.5 for the year. So hopefully that answers your two questions. First, the how much, and then, or how much millage, and then how much that might cost.
Is that safe enough for you, Bill? 0.1, or do you think it should be higher than 0.1?
Well, 50,000 is on a $750,000 revenue estimates.
It's okay.
It's okay. Yeah.
You'll be fine. You'll be fine, Bill. Relax.
It's not like you can't make it.
Bill gets so nervous, because he wants to make sure he doesn't, but no, that will be all right.
Yeah, what I don't want to do is come back in September of next year and say, looks like we're going to miss the mark. We need to transfer general fund dollars because we didn't ask for enough.
Well, interest rates are have bumped up quite a bit over the last couple of weeks.
So we could get some more interest revenue.
And then that's true. So that'll offset it. But that interest rate's going up might depress home sales, which might push down your transfer tax, which might might use up your $50,000.
Well, look, I mean, either way, you have to fund it to the amount that you need, and you've made that, you've put that number in the sand and written that down. So, question is that it's 20 somewhere between $26 and $36 extra a year, which is not great. It's not a big number. It's not, but at the same time, it is an increase. Is there any value to splitting this in terms of half of the 400 coming out of the fund balance now, and using a half of a point, that we have put some stake in the sand to say, you know what, we did go ahead and make this purchase. We did have a thought that this was going to end up with a millage increase at some point. We've done a best job to keep it down. Maybe we keep it to some token level at the very least that allows us some wiggle room on the capital funding too. Does that have any value in your mind?
Are you asking me?
I'm asking
I'm
you.
sorry. I thought you were asking your
It's
fellow.
it's a policy decision.
But I'm asking you first.
We'll take the direction of the board on that one.
Okay.
I think that's
We're going to start calling you Solomon because you just want to split the baby every time. You're always going to split the baby.
No, it's not always. That's only the twice, and it's only been tonight. But I do see value because I really do feel that the folks who have talked to me and my predecessor, that some minor increase does tell us that, you know what, when we do go out for these things, this is real. It is not something that we hope that was just going to be magically waved away as we move forward. And I'd support some measure of that, and I'd like to get your opinion of that.
Well, there is only this pressure until 2026. So it is real, but it is 9 years after this. And I just contend that we have the money in our excess fund balance, which comes from a prior year where, I mean, it's not that we overtaxed, but we have excess money from a year that we didn't spend. So to go to our taxpayers and say, we're going to raise your taxes even though we have this money, I don't feel comfortable with it.
That'd be great, Elaine, because you're going to vote with us. It's going to be awesome. Now, for Phil, an easy way to do your calculation there is $400,000, 10,000 taxpayers, $40. I had that in a second.
Well,
roughly 10,000 taxpayers, so you take the average just by 10,000. I don't see any value in splitting it. It's a tiny thing. If you're going to do it, go ahead and do it and provide fund. You can always reduce taxes in 2026 when Elaine, I bet you won't do it, but you can always do that if you want to. It's always there for you.
I know, you're right. So here's where I see it tonight, Phil. We have 4 possible ways to close this gap. One is to use the fund balance. Second is to have a tax increase. I'm not going to support either of those. Third is a hybrid that you identified. I don't see myself supporting that. If none of those happen, then we're going to have to go back and look at what spending cuts and other policy changes that, essentially close that gap. So as I see it, we just start at 1, start at 2, start at 3, and if we can't close this gap, if there aren't 4 votes to close it, then this one gets tabled to the next meeting, and we have to tell you what we're going to do at the next meeting.
All right, so the first motion is to take from the 2015 excess fund balance $400,000 and use it to pay for the deficit in the open space fund.
Well, why wouldn't you want to vote on the second approach first?
The tax increase?
Yeah, because I think there's only one vote for it.
For the tax increase?
I think so, but.
No, motion on the table in a second. So.
Well, I'll withdraw my motion. I'm not voting for that, so I'm not going to make the motion.
Mr. Chair.
You have a motion?
No.
Oh,
I don't.
All right, then I'll make the motion that we fund it with the 0.1 mils. Is that it? Correct? Okay. And we fund that, and that way freeing up the $400,000 to use for capital projects or other things. So that's my motion. Okay, second. Any other discussion? Any public discussion? That would call the question. Yes, go public. Can you come on up to address us?
I'm probably the only non-political person here, but anyway.
Just state your name, please.
Jack Fallman.
Thank you.
307 Valley Place. I think to be arguing over raising somebody's taxes $35 to $40 is nonsense. I mean, absolute nonsense. I mean, but it's important that whatever you raise the taxes that you don't think you're going to need, that it goes into a surplus fund. So somebody doesn't grab it and use it, which is always a fear in business and in politics. If it's there, you want to use it. So I think you ought to have at least $1 million in your reserve fund. Now, I don't know whether you do or you don't. I have no idea.
We won't,
but
Jack.
It must be a reserve fund.
We're going to spend it. That's what we're doing. That's what we're talking about. We'll spend the whole thing.
Well, then we don't have discipline. I mean, you don't spend more than you make in a year. I mean, you can't run a business that way.
We have a 25% reserve fund. He's kidding.
No, I'm not kidding.
What is that in dollars?
8 million, isn't it? 8 million and change? 8 million. We have 8 million.
Unallocated reserve fund.
This is the unallocated reserve. That's what we've been talking about all night. This is one portion of it.
This is excess.
This is excess. So
reserve.
We have 2.7 million in unallocated reserve. We just allocated 881, and this is another 400,000 of it. So, and we're looking to we're looking to spend almost all of it in those different things that were on the other sheet.
Okay. Well, my case, without being arrogant, is still the same. You should have a much larger reserve fund just for your own purposes, but not spendable in your budget. And $36, $40 a household, to me, is ridiculously low if you're trying to build up a reserve fund. Now, maybe you don't have the guts to tell the taxpayer you're raising the taxes. Maybe that's something else. But I don't think there's no way 75% of the taxpayers in Radnor wouldn't agree to it, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. All right, so we have a motion on the table, and so we'll call the vote. All those in favor of the motion, say aye. Motion to raise taxes. To raise it to 1.1 mil, that's correct. Yes. All those in favor, say aye. We got 2. All those opposed?
Nay. Nay.
Okay, fails 5 to 2. Thank
Okay,
you.
now I'd like to move that we use $400,000 of the 2015 excess fund balance to pay the deficit of the open space fund. for 2017.
I'll second that. You have board discussion? Any public discussion? All right, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, it passes 4-3. All right, so you have your answer on that, Bill.
So how much are you going to take out of the, are you going to use the 331 number or the 400?
Well, the motion was for 400.
Okay.
Bill, what's next on our list? Which one is the next in priority?
Yeah, the last open item really from the last meeting is we had in is the capital fund, the 2017 portion of the pay-as-you-use piece of the capital plan. So I don't know if this is the right time or how much detail the board wants to go into. I would like to take just maybe a minute or two and show how we've reorganized the plan so you can see it. I know it's the first time.
Can I say what I think we need tonight?
Sure.
So I think at a minimum, what you need is the commitment of the 354, correct? To fund it for 17.
Either that, or we go in and we say, look, we're gonna hold all projects, not appropriate any funds out of that portion of the capital plan until we have some sort of funding mechanism.
Right. So, and you're going to describe those projects to us tonight, correct? That's what you have. So I think we need a description of the projects.
Even though it's just finished, but I think it'll be helpful to get that.
And then we would make a decision on the funding of it. And then, yeah, that would allocate that amount of money. Money can move between projects and other projects could come in, but tonight you need an allocation of money that would go for the 354, and then that would set the amount of capital money available for the 17 budget.
Yes. If we get to that point, I think unless there's other open items that I'm not aware of, that would basically button up what we need to get done heading into next week.
But what I'm saying is then we could, if we as a board, the 7 of us, have different priorities, we can reestablish that at the next meeting or even at a subsequent meeting. We just can't change the total amount. So
yes,
tonight
yes.
Tonight you need an amount from us that we will lock in and set at the next meeting. Then we are free to change priorities. We're just not free to change the amount that we budget.
Yes.
Very good. Yep. That makes sense to me.
Don, just to recap, make sure I got what you said. We're talking about going forward, we can reallocate or we can talk about which projects we're going to be doing. We just put in the total umbrella cost as to how much we're going to be talking about. Right?
We're not, tonight we're going to make a commitment to money most likely so that you can put it into.
An overall total figure.
Yes.
Yes.
And if it doesn't mean that we have to commit to those projects
Right.
tonight.
Yes.
We have latitude on them, but we don't have latitude on the money if we're going to give you what you need in order to be ready for the next meeting.
Yes. Okay, so this is the second version of the 5-year capital plan. We dated it today, since today's the day we wrapped it up. Given the amount of information that we added to the plan, we thought it was best to break it out into different sections. So we've identified those sections with dividers. If you're looking at it electronically, there is tabs that you can jump from page to page. So hopefully, for those who are looking at it that way, they can. The sources and uses portion remained very much the same in terms of how it's presented. We have all of our funds that provide some sort of resources to pay for capital improvements. And then we've got those projects, at least in summary, defined in these rows. And we do that for each of the years of the plan. This is also then where we do the arithmetic that determines how much cash is needed from the general fund to fund the capital plan in any one of the years. We do have, as we talked about a couple meetings ago, we've taken the uses of the plan and we've broken them out into the 2 broad buckets. We've got the pay-as-you-go piece and then the pay-as-you-use piece. And then that all totals up into a total capital spend. So what is different now versus what was part of the original capital plan and what's been in place the last few years? We still have the spreadsheet presentation that identifies all of the in this case, I know it's impossible to see on the screen, but we're looking at the police vehicles and equipment and what's included in the budget for 17 and then what's planned then for 18 through 22. We've gone in and we've added these one-page summaries for each of the items where we describe the asset, talk about the justification for the purchase or replacement, and then a current status, which kind of gives the alternative of if that asset were not to be replaced or if we don't buy it. To be perfectly honest, most of the items in the capital plan are replacement in nature. So most of the discussions in that area are focusing on what happens if we don't replace. But then in the financial plan section at the bottom, we identify what years. In this case, we're talking about the replacement of police vehicle number 18.
I assume that's a typo and it's 2009, not 2019.
Well, it would actually be a 2000. So
you're going to replace it with a 2019? Or
yeah,
what?
Yeah. So those are the little things that need to be corrected. But
Yeah.
what happened there is as we were going through and identifying the years in which these items would be replaced, things jumped around a little bit. What will end up happening if approved is in 17, this vehicle, which I'll jump around just for a second, I apologize. It's identified on this row here. So it was originally purchased in 2014. It'll eclipse the 75,000 miles in 2017, which is why it's being recommended for replacement. Before, as history has shown, most of the moving parts inside become, they start failing and requires more repair. But so we identified that in 17 this vehicle would be replaced, and then again in 2021, which is why we got a little confused on the year of the model. It would actually be a 2017 model if it were replaced next year. So we've done that for each of the items included, and I'm just going to page through quickly so you can see each of the items, and then you can see if you just focus on the bottom, the years in which those are being replaced are identified in the plan or in these individual documents.
Can you go back to that sign, the slow down sign? I can't see what's the cost on that, and it's 2025. Okay, there it is.
10,000. Yeah.
2021, 10,000.
Yeah. So that's what we've added. So for all of the projects that are included in the capital plan, we've added these one-page summaries. We've broken them out by department and by funding category. So we're covering the pay-as-you-go under the departmental vehicles and equipment, and then we get into the capital projects group, which is the pay-as-you-use. We still have the spreadsheet breakdown that gives you row by row all of the different items that are included in the plan now, whether they're funded or not. There are a lot of projects that have no dollar amounts in the plan identified, but for the ones that have dollar amounts included, we've added these one-page summaries. So this is so now we're getting into what any kind of fund allocation to the capital plan might go to. This is the section of the plan that it would fund. We have the road resurfacing program. We go into some of the detail about how we come up with the life cycle and the timing for how quickly when we want to get through the roads. A lot of that was included in the discussions with the capital funding that in the CARFAC presentation as well. For purposes of how it's incorporated in the capital plan now, we have the two different funding sources. So we have the state liquid fuels, and over the last few years, the amounts from the state liquid fuels has been the sole source of our road resurfacing program. What we have included here for consideration is adding township tax sources, or in this case, if we were to move the excess fund balance, that would be the source, or any other source that we ultimately identify when we have more of a permanent plan in place, to bring the total funding for the road program up to $1 million. And again, the reason for that is to reduce the life cycle of the road replacement program from roughly 19 down to about 12. And I'm averaging there. Obviously, some of the more highly used roads are replaced on a faster cycle, whereas some of the cul-de-sac and roads that are not used as much are a little bit longer than 12 years. But the average for the whole program would be about 12 years under this scenario.
Can I just ask a question on that? Is that a complaint-based reduction, or is that, the state of the art? Why are we trying to go to 12 from 19?
Hi, Commissioner, if I could. So I work with Mr. White on this. This is based on a few things. There was some previous rules of thumb that really that life cycle should be 10 years throughout a township. Again, as Mr. White had said, tertiary roads might be 15, secondary roads might be less than 10. This was really based on when we evaluate our roads each year, there are more roads to pave than our budget allows if we stay strictly with the state liquid fuel fund. So there's a couple items. We do have a long list, and a complaint may be the reason we go evaluate a road, but it's the evaluation that will put it in the pot, so to speak, for that year's paving. It's not solely because someone called. And so we're doing what we have to, but there are a lot of roads out there that really should be addressed. A few things happen. The longer we wait, when we do go to do that road, the more expensive it is, because now there's additional base repair, amongst other things. There's economies of scale of bidding the $1 million project. We realized that this year. When I say realize, we realized those economies when we bid the combined project that we didn't finish last year because we had issues with the contractor. And this year, we got a great showing on the bid, and we got really good unit prices. So I think all those items wrapped up would, point. I concur with Mr. White. My recommendation is to follow a program like this, and at that point, we start to see the light on a lot of these roads that are in poor shape, roads that are going to be addressed by the utility work that goes on in the township that we would love to follow up on and get that other half paved, but we're unable to do so. We're only able to do it on a case-by-case hit-or-miss basis.
Yeah, and in the administrative discussions that we had when we were coming up with it, we talked about the value, or the decision point in the value gain. So we're looking at the construction, the township portion. So for 2017, it's $52,000, which is significantly lower than it would be in the future years, because again, we're using some of that fund balance that is in the liquid fuels fund, and we're basically spending it down to zero, using all of the funds in there. And so for kind of excluding 2017 for a moment, looking at more like 250,000 and declining, so long as the state liquid fuels funds continues to increase each year, we can turn our entire program around in 7 less years. So for 230 to 250,000 is having a road program that cycles through 7 years quicker, worth the investment of funds. So that's that's the decision point on whether we want to do that. There is the other component of the state liquid fuels that says that we could use those dollars for items other than paving roads. There are other qualifying expenditures, but keep in mind, as we talked about opportunity cost earlier, every dollar that we don't invest into the roads from the state liquid fuels is either less roads we're repaving or more funds from another source to make up for it. So again, if I'm going into too much detail for tonight's discussion, let me know. Really, I know that we're looking at this for the first time, so the decision, I guess, for the immediate the immediate decision is for 2017. The larger policy decisions on how we fund roads over the long term will be discussed in more detail next year. So the road resurfacing is just one of the components of that portion of our capital funding plan. We also have an annual amount that is identified for repairing certain bridges based on inspections that are occurring throughout the township. In a similar way, we allocate a small amount of the capital plan for the replacement of street light poles as they are damaged or are just in need of replacement. Oh, okay. Yeah. For 2017, I'm going to call it a repair, but that may not be an accurate description. But the repair of the Karen is included, and that was included based on discussions that have occurred throughout 2016 on whether that was a priority or not. But $150,000 was included for next year to perform those repairs.
Bill, could I ask, how do you handle a cost that a commissioner asks about that might be a road that has problems that we didn't anticipate, or a bridge, or a sidewalk? I noticed in your presentation back in October, you had commissioner contingency projects of $150,000. But how do you handle that? How do we as a government handle questions or projects from commissioners that are not explicitly stated in the budget?
So there's two different answers. First, I think that when we develop our capital plan moving forward, it probably makes sense. We've talked a little bit about this in other meetings, is to meet more regularly on the plan, to incorporate those projects that commissioners want to be incorporated into the plan on a more regular basis, so that when we get to the budget time, the projects that have been identified throughout the year during those public discussions on the capital plan are incorporated. So I think that's one way to handle it. And for the projects that we can plan for, that's the best way to address those, in my opinion. For the ones that truly are spur of the moment, either it's an emergency or there is a grant opportunity that makes the project appealing, there's a couple different ways we can address it. Either we maintain a little bit higher fund balance in the capital fund and we just use cash, which is how we've been addressing those for the last couple of years. And what we're proposing as part of the capital plan now, we've allocated $150,000. That number, quite honestly, is a little bit made up. It's not based on any type of project or amount, but it is just taking a piece of the capital plan and making sure that there's something in there to address those projects from a funding perspective. If the relationship from planning to fund balance comes into play, where if we're going to be very rigid about the projects we include in the capital plan year by year and not allow for projects to come up midstream, then we don't need as much fund balance because we're basically planning for all the projects that we're funding. If, on the other hand, we want to have more flexibility on identifying projects at any given time, then more fund balance is going to be necessary.
Okay.
And to Don's point from earlier, there's also flexibility within the allocation for that year for the whole capital plan. So if you have an item that hasn't come to fruition or a project that never got legs, you could use that money for another capital project.
Absolutely, yes.
That was more ripe. Can we go back to the cairn that you were looking at? What, where did this project come from?
Hi, Commissioner. So if you were to visit the cairn, I couldn't get I try to get a high picture of it to give everybody an idea of what's actually there. But if you were to travel up to the top of that peak, if you will, right off the Blue Route, the western side of the cairn is coming down. It's falling down. There's some rocks out of it, and there's some other ones.
And there's a lot of vegetation that's even growing in it.
That's correct. So it's in need of repair, and as Mr. White said, it might not be repair, it may be rebuilding of the cairn. I can honestly say I don't have experience with cairns and how they're constructed, so we would have to bring some folks on board that are familiar with, from the design standpoint for the repair and a contractor.
And there's a constituency that cares about this?
Yes, there is.
Okay. Cares to the tune of $150,000?
And again, that price in the outline, it notes, so there's some issues because of the PennDOT access, and again, dealing with, perhaps specialty designers and specialty contracts. So if this moved forward and we got the prices and it was below that, we'd all be very happy, but we're trying to make sure we're covered for what may occur.
And if it came back and has a lot of more expenses, it would come back before us before we spent a lot more on something.
Correct. Just like in any project, we get your permission to go to bid, and then when those bids are in, we come back to you to ask for award.
Some of the other projects that are included in the pay-as-you-use category were the 350,000 in the excess fund balance would be helping to fund. There's some facility or items within the facilities that are in need of upgrading. The tire changer and drill press at the Public Works facility that the mechanics utilize. It's not a real big ticket item, but it is used on a regular basis for the maintenance of the vehicles that are out there. The gate opener at the Public Works garage as well. Again, it's not a large item in terms of dollar amounts, but it's something that needs to be looked at. And then it's been proposed as part of past plans, but getting onto a more routine schedule of resurfacing parking lots. So for 2017, municipal parking lots, I'm sorry, not necessarily the parking lots that are incorporated in the bond funding, but these would be the municipal parking lots. 2017 includes the resurfacing for the West Wayne Avenue storefronts as identified in the aerial. And then we've talked a little bit about the signals. The two that are included in 2017, it's less of a traffic signal project, but more of the Conestoga Road Tunnel lighting project. This has been on the radar as long as I've been here with Radnor, and the justifications included in the documentation on the lighting and the situation that exists down there. Then the other big one that we've talked about is doing a left-hand turn lane at the Conestoga and Sproul intersection to help with the traffic there. So
speaking of left-hand turn lanes, at our last meeting, the subject of the main intersection in the township at North Wayne, South Wayne, and Lancaster Avenue, and the moving traffic flow came up. And I believe our police are going to be studying the possibility of a left turn arrow on North Wayne Avenue for southbound traffic, and possibly a left turn arrow on South Wayne Avenue for northbound traffic, in both cases going into Route 30. So do we have to plan for that in this budget?
Hello, Commissioner. So we did, Amy Kaminsky did provide us with a proposal to do that work, to do the very preliminary, just to address those turns. What you see here in front of you in that worksheet would be the full-blown permitting, design, and construction of whatever is permitted. Specifically, the driving factor going back several years has been southbound North Wayne with a left-hand turn onto eastbound 30 and the congestion that causes. So we'll get a small bit of that work done this year. It's in the scheme of things, it's relatively inexpensive. It's within the manager's purview. But this is to do the whole project.
You don't have the finances shown.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I guess I'm a little, I'm not sure what the genesis of this was. You know, I haven't heard anyone tell me that this is an issue in my 7 years, and now so how does this get into the project or into the capital plan?
So Commissioner Curley, so when this was brought to me, and I cannot remember the day or the time, but this was discussed at staff traffic, whether it was in the minutes or I don't believe there was a recommendation to you, but it was an issue there a few years back. And in dealings with the WBA, I have received from them many comments on how that traffic backs up. So this is just a recommendation to the board, just laying it out there. Here is a possible project slated for 2020. If you wish to move forward it or slide it wherever it may go. Anecdotally, I think if you speak to folks in that general area at the AM and PM peaks and even at lunchtime, you can see that we're backed up into the crosswalk.
Right. Is there any reason to believe, though, that all you're going to do is push the backup someplace else? You know, essentially, you're going to move the backup. So somebody's going to get inconvenience. It's going to be one turning lane at the expense of another.
And that's all part of what would happen, you know, during that original, well, we're going to learn something for what Amy's going to do for us this year. But in that permitting process and that design process, that's when we're going to learn a lot. And that could tell us when we come to you one way or the other whether the impetus is still there for this project, if it was going to be a problem, or if what occurred, you know, the benefit of it go to the cost-benefit ratio if it's not there. We won't know that until we're getting deeper into the design and permitting.
Don, just on your first question, I do get requests from time to time. I got one today, as a matter of fact, from Robert Forster, who lives in the First Ward, and he pointed out that you have that pedestrian scramble cycle, the long Lancaster Avenue east-west green, and then you have a relatively short north-south on Wayne Avenue. And but as to your point about the cost and whether it would be effective, I'm certainly with you on that, that as we get into it, if the experts like Amy and PennDOT and anybody else tell us that it's not going to pay off or it's going to push a problem elsewhere, then we would have to put the red light on it.
Sounds like for these projects, we have the capability to do the preliminary engineering, sort of the ready, aim, fire approach. We're not going to be 200 grand into a design only to determine after the fact that we don't get enough benefit from it.
Correct. And I would come to, you know, through the manager would come to this board with a proposal for award of a design, and we would structure that so that hopefully up front we can find these things out and come back to you prior to going to bid or maybe even completing the proposal with some of that preliminary information.
If I could, just in fact, when we get into the more regular conversations about these projects, we've included all of the financing and expenses in 1 year. A likely scenario is that if we genuinely plan this project out for 2020, let's say, it could be that the planning and engineering, the 50,000, is in 18 or 19. That allows us to do all of the due diligence ahead of time for planning for these projects. So it doesn't have to be that they all happen in 1 year. If we're planning for them, the pre-planning and the costs ahead of the projects can occur in fiscal years before the actual improvements.
Bill and Steve, is there anything here in these projects for King of Prussia Road, Eagle Road, Upper Gulf, any signalization, anything? I know that Mr. Fulman here that's one of the issues that we talked about. So is there anything in here? I don't recall anything, but I'm just trying to...
No, sir. We did rebuild, actually, Mrs. Kaminsky did the design at Eagle and Radnor Street several years back, I guess about 3 or 4 years ago. That signal was completely replaced. There's nothing slated in the 5-year for work along that stretch from a signal standpoint?
Or for Upper Gulf? At the corner, so the issue is there's backups, a lot of traffic, more and more traffic, and we talked about it last
Upper Gulf
week.
and King of Prussia?
Yeah.
So that's, I hate to date myself, so probably 10 or 12 years ago.
Not that intersection.
That was a joint
actually,
project.
Not that intersection, but that road and King of Prussia Road. So right now, we don't have anything slated. I don't want to talk about changing that intersection, okay? All right.
Thank you.
That's fine. But continue. The biggest issue that I hear about is King of Prussia Road and traffic and Upper Gulf Road. And also, we've addressed, Pine Tree, but, that's the other one.
So are you talking, I'm sorry, I'm just not sure the general area of King of Prussia Road you're talking about, or is it the whole stretch?
It's a stretch of King of Prussia Road north of the railroad, Radnor Station, north to, and then Upper Gulf Road heading towards King of Prussia, east.
Towards Arden Road, and yes.
Yeah, towards Arden Road.
Yes, we don't have any, there's nothing in that for plans for signalization or traffic study at this point.
Well, about 10 years ago, there was a very detailed study of a traffic signal for that intersection. It really is a nightmare.
We're not going back there.
It had approvals.
People didn't want to do that.
From various points, but then at the last minute, after all the money had been spent on it, it was vetoed. So, is that what you're asking about?
No.
What are you asking about?
I'm asking about everything on those roads other than that. So, that's my question. Specifically, the issue seems to be people taking that to Arden Road to the new entrance off of the to the Schuylkill. Also, we see more and more people cutting through from 202 down to the Blue Route to 476, utilizing King of Prussia Road. As you're also aware of, we have many trucks that wedge themselves under the bridge or smash up the tops of their vehicles because they're following GPS and they're trying to take a shortcut and avoid the intersections, presumably. So I was just wanted to see if there was anything in there. I'll be raising it further, but to see what we can do. But if there's anything in there, I wanted to know before we raised it any further.
There is a commissioner, but if you can provide some specificity between now and our next meeting, I could try to, come up with some type of a budget price for what you're looking for, and the board could decide if they wanted to move on that.
Or we'll talk to, we'll work that out offline.
And I had one particular question too along that lines. The previous iteration had a resurfacing of the South Wayne lot in 18, and it looked to me like that wasn't on your plan. Or, sorry.
That may be one that we're looking to move up into 17, possibly.
So I think so it is there. I see it in 18. It wasn't on the it wasn't on 17. Probably appropriately because the slide you showed only had 17 funds. But my opinion is that I'd like to see that moved up. And here's the logic. That our corridor, what is downtown Wayne, is essentially the war memorial to the train station. We've lost control of Route 30 because PennDOT requires 33,000 trips per day, whatever it is, along there. So that becomes downtown Wayne. Those are the images that are in our brochures. That's what is Wayne to us, or downtown Wayne. And the anchor of it is a parking lot that is really falling apart. So one of the things that I don't know that we need to decide that tonight, but there's a little bit of trading. To me, that's a priority that should be moved up, and that lot should be reconfigured to be the anchor of downtown Wayne.
So that's going to be to mill that, Steve, to mill that whole area? I mean, it's that parking lot is very wide and flat, and right? So is that milling certain portions of it or the whole thing?
That was actually looked into a little more. As you know, on South Wayne Avenue, there's multiple entrances and they're very wide. So it was actually to perform a survey, look at really defining the entrances and exits to the parking lot. If possible, perhaps some islands with some growth, some trees in them that would beautify the area. And the parking lot is in such bad shape, yes, most all of it would have to be milled and it would be resurfaced.
And there's parking blocks there too, right? You have to be
Correct.
careful that you don't, those precast concrete parking blocks, I think, are in there.
Yes, sir.
And so you're talking about making islands and maybe presumably removing those then?
Possibly. Once we get, again, once we get into design and don't want to blow the thing up with going too far out, but I think it's safe to say that it could use some beautification alongside its resurfacing, which could be some planting.
Beautification and infiltration.
Yes,
I mean,
ma'am.
we could do some bio retention somewhere there.
Yeah,
But
I would-
can I ask that, do we have any intel on what's happening to that property that is adjacent to that's, I had heard was on the market? The
Post office?
the behind the post office, the
Distribution center.
distribution part of it, which is a pretty big part of that.
It was my understanding that there are family members that are involved with that and getting that prepared for market.
So, I mean, that's a big part of that calculus of what's going to happen right there and what we can do in conjunction with whatever happens right there.
But I think we can't wait. I think part
Yeah.
of
I
why
would
that,
be in favor of moving it up a
yeah,
year.
part of why
Uh,
that project has deteriorated beyond what we are used to in the rest of our downtown area is because there was always this idea that maybe somebody would come in and do some kind of project. So my sense is that needs to be a priority moved up to 17.
Do you feel that way if you've learned that piece of property was on the market?
Well, it's been on the market for the whole time I've been commissioner. That's my understanding.
I don't think that's true.
So,
I mean, there have been
okay.
rumors about it, but it
Yeah.
has not been on the market.
So my inclination is that just more rumors and we need to move on it.
Right, so if you learned tomorrow that it was on the market, would it change your
I
opinion?
guess I don't have a lot, no, I don't know that it would. I'd have to get into the specifics of it. I don't have a lot of confidence that something is going to happen there quickly, that it's worth waiting for. So if somebody were to convince me that something is going to happen quickly and somehow we can benefit from that, then obviously it would change my priority. But right now, to me, that lot is in desperate need of our attention, and we've been waiting for a long time to do something to it.
Who uses that lot most often?
I think that's serviced by downtown Wayne,
Oh, teachers
the middle
and,
school, yeah.
teachers and staff.
I mean,
and
it's a usually full lot every day, meaning on Saturday, it's full from Saturday evening, it's going to support the downtown area, and then during the day, weekdays, it's generally full.
The library actually has a portion of that lot up by there.
That's what I'm most familiar, coming out of the library or using that for the library.
Is there a consent,
I'd be happy to move that 200 to 2017 if we moved the cairn to 2018.
yeah. So Rich is shaking his head. I guess we don't have to decide that tonight. We can decide among ourselves, but
Is this the
For me,
time
I
to
prefer-
submit pork barrel project requests?
Sounds like earmarks, doesn't it? Well, you already got your sidewalk for $700,000 in front of the Rover dealer.
well, this
Well, that's for
isn't
you.
a-
You know, that's your word.
Bill, are we in the middle of, at this point, are we really talking about projects to this level? Or is that what
Yes.
you want from us at this point?
We have to talk about projects because that's what's going into the spending column.
Yeah, yeah, and we'd like to finalize the plan as part of the document. So if there's movement to be done that the board can come to an agreement on, then now, yeah, I mean, this is part of why we're having the public hearing.
Well, the biggest piece of it, I thought, was the paving, right? Wasn't that your number one priority, was expanding the paving of the roads to be over and above the liquid fuels? Was that the number one item, or was any of these other items more?
No, that's only 50,000 for this year.
Well, yeah, and that's the biggest change year over year from the plan that we were looking at a year ago at this time, was the change in the road resurfacing. Most of these other items have been out there for a couple years.
As long as we're on roads, Steve, much of the First Ward has been torn up by the utility companies, Pico and Aqua. Now, we're heading into cold weather. They've been patched, but they're very lumpy and bumpy. Is there a plan in the spring to resurface all those areas where they have torn it up and patched it?
We, Commissioner, so we're staying on them. What you're driving on now on North Wayne Avenue, all the way out to the Tredyffrin border, is the temporary patch. There is a requirement by PennDOT that they're not allowed to do the permanent patch for X days. So at a minimum, we're trying to get them to get the permanent base repair, we call it, in. And then the plan is for them, they're required by PennDOT, same rules we have. They will have to mill and overlay that single lane of North Wayne, and that would definitely be next year, from what they've been talking to us about.
Okay, but until that happens, you're saying that there's going to be a second patching process for
Correct.
that?
So it's similar to Conestoga Road from, say, Brookside towards Ivan. So that's the permanent base repair. Again, Aqua PA, that will get milled and overlaid next year. But at least the permanent base repair is wider, smoother, and longer lasting than what you see, which is definitely temporary.
I know, Mr. President, I know I come across always as the bad guy, but that's okay. Let's call it the way it is. PennDOT does a pathetic job, and no one ever calls out PennDOT for what it is. There is no inspector rarely out here in the township to oversee the construction work that takes place. Conestoga Road is completely unacceptable the way it is. I'm working with John Rice now to put inspection fees in place that the township could actually have an inspector out on these projects to maintain and oversee these and then back bill the utilities, because PennDOT is absentee with a lot of these projects. We end up sending police out to help enforce traffic control because those companies that are out there do a pathetic job at best. How many times do they just drag signs out and put road closed? I know I've been witness of that. They don't follow the traffic rules and regulations of how they set up detours. The condition of roads, look at South Wayne Avenue. For as long as I've been here, that road is completely unacceptable. I think when you look at unfunded mandates of what are passed down here to the township of how we have to patch roads, for PennDOT's lack of doing that, of how many thousands of dollars that come out of Steve's budget because we have to patch those roads, how many times we have to clean up trees that they don't respond to. You look at all the thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars that we have to put into this in manpower and overtime for police, public works, for that, and we get nothing back in return. And I think when you look at the state's budget deficit that they're going into in this year, I think you're going to see continue of more of that. But Jim, when you go back to this, again, there was no oversight from PennDOT on these at all. And I think until there is a shakeup in Harrisburg here, we're going to continue to see these roads stay in the conditions they are. And
well, I know when we try to get
much of this,
we try to get an answer from them, we leave messages with their district people. Never get a call back to find out when they're going to do this particular road. Never hear back from them.
Well, I think you're going to see something come in front of you shortly here that John Rice is working on, in which then we will put inspectors out and that we will then bill the utilities to make sure that a lot of these road conditions you speak about that all of you experience that are unacceptable, that these will not be left in these conditions. And we will continue to ride the utilities. We'll continue to take them off these projects as well, because these are not acceptable. And again, our taxpayers are being hit twice for what PennDOT does not do.
What about your adaptive, $500,000 for the adaptive traffic control? Is that in there too?
Yes, Commissioner Booker, that is. And that So right now.
Would that pick up King of Prussia Road, north of the Eagle Road into that intersection?
No, the traffic adaptive was slated for the Route 30 corridor. And we request to move it out to 18 because at this point, the only funding we have is, you can see by the footnote, Villanova University is required to fund $175,000 as determined at the conditional use hearing. We have applied for some grants. We were unsuccessful with them, but we plan on continuing to try that, as well as see if developers will work there. But that critical corridor is really Radnor-Chester Road through the interchange with 476 all the way down to our last signal, which is Lowry's.
So the last version of this, we had 500,017 for this, to do a portion of them, didn't we?
It was always 1.1.
Oh, was it always 1.1?
Well, but it was in 17. My recollection,
Correct.
it was 500,000 also, but it was in 17. So if it's not in 17, what did we populate this with? Because that freed up $500,000 or $1 million. I thought it was $500,000, like Rich said.
No, I'm sorry, but it was listed, to my best of my recollection, it was listed in 17 at 1.1. And because we didn't have all that funding, we request to push it out because really it was a non-starter for next year.
So what replaced it then? If we just freed up $1 million, something had to replace it.
Yeah, and this is part of the problem with the presentation of how the plan was organized. So we're looking at the version of the capital plan that was part of the original recommendation from October 10th. We have the Route 30 adaptive system at 1.1 million. But we were always making that contingent upon some sort of contribution. We had identified developer contribution to pay for it. It was never flowing through to the bottom line because we were assuming someone else was going to pay for it or something else was going to pay for it, be it grants or developer contributions. So that 1.1 million that was identified there was basically offset by this negative assumption for the revenue.
So I'm looking at page 165, traffic control system, $500,000. That's what I thought.
Yeah. So
okay, that's the okay, very good.
Yeah. So what you're looking at is the sum between the 200,000 for the road, the Conestoga Road tunnel, and the Route 320 and Conestoga left-hand turn signal.
Okay. Very good.
Before we move off of this, I wanted to ask some questions. The 320 Conestoga, when we look at that, I assume that the traffic study to support that work will take in where Newtown goes off. I mean, when you come by there in the morning, for example, the problem isn't those traffic signals. The problem is people wanting to turn left on Newtown, going over to the school. And likewise at night, you have a problem with people turning left, but also people coming out of Newtown. That just messes up because they come out and then they want to go over to the left lane. And then for downtown Wayne, my observation has been, and it's virtually every time I'm there, that part of the problem with people being able to turn left is jaywalkers. And I don't know, I mean, that's human behavior. We can't legislate too much there. But the traffic backs up because of the jaywalkers. And green arrow wouldn't make any difference at all.
Well, maybe we should give warning tickets to jaywalkers.
What do you say, Bill?
Yeah. So, that bill.
No, Colarulo.
Respectfully, I believe the problem is the traffic that's going north on Wayne Avenue. It prevents the cars going south to make that left turn. I think it's the vehicles. I didn't see many pedestrians causing it, but it's something we could certainly look into.
And that's always been your contention about that too, isn't it? That's why you were looking at those left turn arrows in those two spots on Wayne.
And more so for the traffic traveling north. I think that's more imperative than having an arrow for the traffic going south.
All right, Bill, you have more to do? I don't want to.
No, that covers what's in here now.
Okay.
So,
All right, I'd like to ask this. I have just recently got a request for a stormwater improvement project near Cowan Field that is not to alleviate flooding, but it's to alleviate ponding. And Steve Orsini's people have done an estimate. It's $70,000. I'd just like to put that in, not for next year, but just get it into the system and push it at the appropriate time for action.
Shouldn't it be in the stormwater budget, Jim? I mean, isn't that why we have a stormwater budget?
I'm not sure if it's operations and maintenance or if it's truly capital.
So, I don't know, if it's an intervention, it should be in stormwater.
I agree.
And I'm going to make a complaint later on tonight, and maybe it's timely, so maybe it can happen sooner rather than.
Okay, then let's bring it up in stormwater.
Don, before we move on to that then, can we close this section for the moment? Or what do we need to
yes.
do?
What we need to do part was at the front end when we
Right.
talked about the funding.
But you need a commitment from us for $354,000 from the fund balance in order to meet the 17 obligations.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I want to add one to it. Let's add $96,000 and move the South Wayne lot up from 18 to 17. And I am sure you can find $100,000. You can find a way to make that project
Why don't
move
we
from
just
18 to
switch the
17.
Cairn? The Cairn does not have to happen next year.
I think the Karen, just put 50,000 in for the Karen. I talked to
Yeah,
the
there you
original people who built that. I think we can.
So we just funded the South Wayne lot.
Correct. Rich and I will go move those rocks around, right?
Well, no. What we need, it is mostly handwork. We need to have a machine that's like the size of an excavator, Steve. Not a backhoe. You need to have an excavator size, and to have that up there. And then the guys they move it around. They have to kind of tear it apart a little bit and rebuild it. But it's not expensive. It's just it's tough to do. So let's. If we just put 50 in there, I think that would be a good placeholder. And if we don't use it, we'll push it back.
Okay, so I'll make a motion that we authorize staff to prepare the budget to apply $354,000 from the 2015 excess fund balance to the capital fund, that we also authorize them to include $96,000 and that we add the South Wayne lot to the 17 project list.
Second.
Hey, is there any other further
And
comment?
you'll do the part with the Karen that Rich identified. That'll free up the money.
Right. Okay, any other public comment? Move the question. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Passes 7-0. Thank you.
Now, what about the pension, the bond, the pension obligations, that came off of there, right?
Bill, what's next, from your perspective?
I've got nothing. I don't have anything else.
You're good.
So stormwater and Willows, as I see it.
We can talk about that?
Stormwater, just whether to change the fee?
Yes, that was on your original list. was
Yeah,
stormwater.
that's always up for discussion. So, yep.
So here's my sense of, we have a $3 million fund balance at the end of this year. In 17, there's that looks like a $500,000 placeholder for undetermined capital or something like that. And then when you project out 6 or 7 years, you still have a $500,000 balance at the end. So we could, as I read those numbers, we could not collect the fee and still do everything on the project list over the next 4 or 5 years. So I think we got to tap the brakes on the fee. I know Rich wants it to be 0. Some of you want it to be 100%, but to me, it shouldn't be what it was last year. We need to tap the brakes on it, even if it's 75% or 50%, but we need to collect less money because we can't spend it as fast as we can collect it. And based upon the meeting we had last week, I don't think it's prudent for us to try to spend it faster. So your thoughts? I don't know if anybody else agrees or disagrees.
Well, I disagree. I think that after going through, I missed the meeting last week, but I watched it and went through the report that they gave, and it's a staggering amount of work and projects that we have ahead of us. It is true that we're 3 years in and we have not started to spend in earnest. We are just now in the midst of our first big ticket project, but the pace that the Stormwater Management Committee has suggested will quickly catch us up to the money that we have, and then we will be really having to prioritize because we will not have enough money, and we will only be able to take one project every 2 years, and these projects will eat up more than that year's worth. None of these projects are just $1 million. So I think it would be insane to stop collecting just because we haven't caught up when these projects are now starting to come. We have finally gotten to the point, after all the studying, that we have a roster of really important projects to get going. We have a nest egg to start with, and we're going to need to build that nest egg.
So can I just evaluate the sanity of it? So we could do everything that's on the list. We could cut the fee in half and not change the expenditure side. So I think we could eliminate the fee entirely and not change the expenditure side. So we could choose to do this. No, out through 2020. We could choose to reduce the fee significantly and then choose not to affect the expenditure side of this. That's how much we have accumulated in excess of what we can spend.
I don't see it as insane at all. I think that's right. There's just the pace that these projects go. I'm not at all concerned that you'll run out of money, so I would take it to zero.
Well, I think we should increase the expenditures and accelerate some of the projects. There were some mighty big dollars on that list, that presentation. And I think we're going to have some surprises too, and MS4 is coming at us. So,
but we have a $500,000 sort of fudge line in there, right? $500,000 for something like undetermined capital.
And one project is $2 million.
But if we can't decide how to spend it in 17, and we have a $3 million surplus, then we are collecting it faster than
we don't have a $3 million surplus. After 17, we will not, because Banbury will be underway.
Okay, so in 17, at the end of 17, from this document, if this is still accurate, we had a $3 million surplus that went down to about $500,000 over a 4-year period.
Yeah, I've pulled up what the Stormwater Committee folks presented on the 7th. It's difficult to display on the screen because it goes over 2 different pages and is kind of small.
This is the one that they just presented to us
On the
just
7th.
recently.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right. What's included in the budget document is what was adopted by the board earlier this year.
Right, so it's at the end of 2016, it's about $1 million balance. At the end of 2017, it's about a $500,000 balance. At the end of 2018, it's about a $400,000 balance.
Well, that doesn't jive. The numbers he's showing is about $2 million and then $1 million.
And it also is inconsistent with the document that we have. So
yeah, so I think the difference is that the Stormwater Committee changed their recommendation. What is included in the document is what the board approved. So that.
In which document? The one you have up there?
No, the one that was in the township manager's recommended budget.
Okay.
That is what was approved late spring, I think, after, well, it was approved by the board. So what the Stormwater Committee presented 2 weeks ago would modify that. So the decision for the board is you could keep what was recommended or what you approved earlier this year as the plan moving forward, or amend it to include or incorporate the changes that's SWMEC recommended here.
And these include the Banbury estimate. Right, so I
Yes.
mean, we've said all along that this is a fluid process. As these projects come up, we'll be amending the budget. I don't think there's any world where we will be that we're going to have too much money for these projects. I mean, when you take one look at that list that came to us from the consultant, it's overwhelming. And our problem is going to be in hashing out which ones we're going to spend our limited funds on, not what are we going to do with all this excess money.
Right, that is the problem as I see it, is what you just described. But where we differ is that, to me, it's a problem to have a balance as large as this. And that we need to tap the brakes on the collection side and let the spending catch up to the amount of revenue
Which it
we have.
does in, it's
So
hard to
I
tell
don't-
what
yeah,
year
I
that
don't know
is.
what
Can you
that is, so-
go up on that, Bill?
In 2018, we're down to $100,000.
By design.
Right.
Because they part of their plan was to come up with $100,000 to $200,000 in balance every year to cover contingencies or projects that come up quickly. And so by design, they put that in there. It's no more than $200,000 roughly. And if we change that policy, because that was the policy that they were recommending, then we have spent it on another project. That's it.
But look, I'm looking at this, and it's showing at the end of 2017, 1.9 million. Okay, that's the end. That's the start of, that's 1/1/2018. So I see in 2017, $3 million there, right? 2017, 1.1 right there, and 1.964, right? So what are the projects that are scheduled here? You say Banbury, that they're going to spend 1.2 million? They won't be able to spend it. Even if the project's done, they won't be able to spend that in 2017. They won't get done.
And so, Bill, what are the year-end balances of that?
We can try to pick apart any one of these, but I think it's worth bearing in mind that we started the effort to get our hands around a stormwater utility in the spring of 2012, and it took us 2 years to pass it. And I think it would be wrong to reverse course now and somehow take the money that's in the bank and return it to some location, I guess taxpayers.
It's not returned. It's just not collected.
Well, but...
And that's not such a bad idea, returning it to the taxpayers.
Well, it is a bad idea in this case because we're just going to have to get it back from them. We're going to have to go through another
They'll
political...
just go ahead and spend it on
political
things that they
merry-go-round.
want. It's unbelievable.
We can't spend it if we don't have the engineering done.
You know what they want? They want the stormwater management, the stormwater problem solved. That's what they want.
Yeah,
But they can't do it. They can't. We've shown that they are not able to spend the money in that timely fashion. So we've accumulated all this extra money.
Well, I find it a little less than reasonable that we asked them to not spend any money until they had done a study to find out where the problems were and to get the priorities straight. And we are at that point right now, knowing full well we were accumulating money as seed money to go ahead and start these projects in earnest. In 2 years, you're down to their recommended $200,000 contingency fee. If you want to raise that or lower that, then they can find another way to spend that money in outlying years.
And just keep in mind,
in several years, in 2 years, they're at the spot where it's prudent to be.
We're not criticizing them. We're criticizing this board.
Well, either way, I mean,
Well, it's very different to me.
Well, all right, but either way, the process was, and I think it was a reasonable process, to not just start any old project and see what happened, but to see where your priorities were, and that they've done, and they're at that point now.
Yeah.
And now, having done that, they need the money to go ahead and go for it.
I'd like to move that we maintain the stormwater fee at the current level for 2017.
Second.
Wait, what's the motion on the floor? Wasn't there already a reduction?
On the floor. So now there is, and it's seconded. So, any wrap-up discussion?
Nope.
Any public discussion? Call the vote. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, passes 4-3. 4-3.
All right, tell us, I mean, try to.
Were there other fees?
Honestly,
Bill?
this is a concern that you raised before, Jim, because if they can't spend it, it's a fee, $3 million. Nobody's getting anything for that fee.
We did vote, but I want to make one point. I get people all the time saying to me, why have we engaged CH2M at a great expense for, now it's about a year and a half, to do a study to learn things we already know. We have flooding in various places in the township. So to say now, because we've been spinning our wheels for a year and a half and haven't been able to spend money on projects because of the study going on, and to say now that, well, we have to now return the money back to somebody, to the taxpayers, to me is disingenuous, because the reason we were in this position is that certain people wanted to study this problem even though we already knew where the problems were and what the problems were.
Well, it wasn't any of us who just voted against that on the board. We didn't.
All right.
Now, hold on. You can't let Jim criticize us and then move on to the next item.
Then go ahead and
So Jim, the studying part, that is your term, not mine. What I wanted was preliminary engineering so that I could do the cost-benefit analysis and make a determination. If you remember, when that particular CH2M Hill project was before us, CH2M project was before us, some of us tried to eliminate that. All we wanted was the preliminary engineering. And it was the board's majority that turned that from a $100,000 project into a $250,000 project. So to try to take that project and pass it off on somebody else, I think is a mistake. And then we're not looking to take the money and give it back. We're just looking to collect less while we catch up with it. And you might disagree, but to call it disingenuous is a stretch on your part, in my opinion.
Right.
All I remember, Don, is that you wanted to study this township-wide.
Study is your term. I wanted preliminary engineering so I could do cost-benefit analysis, and I still do. And I tried to get the study part out, but the board's majority was the one that was unwilling to do that.
I don't recall it that way at all.
Okay, I don't think anybody's being disingenuous, and I think that we have an honest.
Well, that is the term he.
I am saying that I'm opining that I do not think anyone is.
Very mild term.
Let's check the YouTube. We'll see.
All right, very good. Bill, what is next that you need?
Well, we could talk more about pension if we wanted to. I think where we're at with that is it might be best to come back and have more time dedicated to it at a meeting in 2017, where we can get into more of the detail levels so we can determine what the funding level the board wants to see going forward.
And it's moot for 17, meaning we spent down the fund balance, so the question went away for 17.
Well, yeah, not only that, but in terms of the MMO and the assumptions that are tied to it, those are basically set for this year, or for 17 as well. So nothing significant is going to change between now and...
And we have at other previous meetings and given some level of commitment to tackling that question early on in 2017 so that we're not caught by the end, that we have some direction in terms of policy and what we think we want to do.
Yeah, and I think having the opportunity for the professionals that we engage to do the actuary and to do the manage the asset side, having them here to answer questions and where we can talk about consequences or benefits of making certain decisions would be beneficial versus trying to figure it out here in this environment.
Sounds like we'll look for you to give us some guidance on that as to when and how and who's involved in that. So appreciate that.
So the only item that I have left is the Willows.
The Willows, that's right, yeah.
Meaning we have talked about making a commitment to it. We don't have any money for it. We know that it's going to cost $500,000 to $3 million. So we've got to figure out what we're going to do.
Commissioner, if I may, we have $416,000 remaining from the settlement money that we still have available for the water line. We have not run the water line yet, and there was repaving of some of the roads. We've kind of put that on hold since we don't know what the use is going to be of the mansion yet, so to run a water line up, depending on what the use would be. So there is $416,000 there that the board can use if whatever direction you want to go in. So we can continue to keep that in a hold pattern until the board makes a determination. So if you wanted to hire an architect or anybody else to do any further work or exploratory work, there is money that sits there, or if you just want to move forward with one particular item, so that would not impact any additional dollars you'd have to put forward until you have a plan of what direction you'd want to go. So that is available to the board.
And just if I could add to that, just by way of history, the source of those funds is the $8 million. If you recall, the board adopted legislation that identified how those funds would be used. 1.1 million was for the Willows, and it identified capital projects, including the bridge replacement that is done. The water line replacement, of course, at that time, we were assuming that there'd be activity at the mansion, and then resurfacing of the road. So it's what I'm getting at is it's funds that are set aside in a dedicated fund that are there until they're used or redirected to something else.
And how much is in the Willows Fund right now?
Well, the Willows Fund is operating off of general fund transfers. There's in the Willows Enterprise Fund,
Bless you.
the entire amount of fund balance that's there, which is just a few $1,000s, is coming from the general fund, and that's basically to pay the utility bills and these repairs and maintenance as they come up. The larger amount that the township manager referred to is in the $8 million settlement fund, and it's there.
It needs no action.
Well, I thought we needed 500.
I mean, as I see it, it needs action. We have to decide what we're going to do with that building. Otherwise, it's just going to limp along like it has in the past.
Yeah, but we aren't going to decide that tonight. It was not on the agenda, and it's not something we need to put in the budget if there's 400,000 there already. So I think it would be unfair to make any big decisions tonight about what to do with the Willows when
Yeah, fair enough.
this is an empty room and everyone in our community cares about it.
Well, we can decide for the budget.
With one
An important
person in the
person is still
room.
here.
We can decide for the budget without deciding what we're going to do for the Willows, right? That's what we're deciding, is what we put in the budget for the Willows.
Yes, and also a process for the Willows, because what we talked about making a decision on the Willows and then having that funded. And quite frankly, the decisions we're making for the Willows aren't tonight here, wouldn't be any different than any of the other decisions we made for the budget. So like Rich said, it's
Those
how
were
much.
all on the agenda. Willows wasn't.
I don't know, the agenda just said budget, and so we have to figure out
I'm
how
sorry,
much.
Bill's memo.
Yeah, we have to figure out, well, we didn't have the memo until the meeting, so.
The memo from the last budget meeting set out what we were going to discuss at the first meeting and what we were going to discuss on the 21st. And the Willows was not. on there.
Well, if somebody wants.
Yeah, those were intended to be talking points. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a budget discussion.
So are we going to, is this just going to limp along? Is it going to be another
Deferral.
budget season of no action, $35,000 to keep water out, out of the building, and then this continues into next year? Or are we going to try to make a decision now that goes into the 17 budget? I don't mean now like tonight. I mean in 16 so that we can put it in the 17 budget.
I don't think we're in the position to make a decision in 16 to go in the 17 budget. I don't. I mean, this has been a 5-year process. We've had input from far and wide. I don't think that we have unity on this board about what we want to do. And it seems unrealistic to me to think that we're going to come up with a solution and how much it will cost and what's suitable to put in our budget in the next week.
Well, but by not doing that, we do make a decision what we're going to do in 2017, which is zero. So if we just put in $35,000,
It's
$50,000.
$417,000.
Well, then we're making the choice that we want to allocate those remaining funds
They're already
to improving
allocated.
it. So I would say, if Elaine, I don't have a problem with putting $50,000 in the budget, and we'll let the Willows go through next year, and we'll make plan for next year and see what we do for 18.
Yeah, I mean, so I think, Elaine, I think you're accurate. It's going to be very difficult for us to make a big decision like that in the next 2 weeks. So then it lends itself to another placeholder year for the Willows budget. So some number in there that lets you keep water, out of the...
Well, it's not completely placeholder because we have almost $500,000 to work with. So if we came up with some great decision, wow, we decided to do this use and we're going to get started, we have some money to
Right,
start
so
with.
that's the question that we have tonight. There's a placeholder. What is it? Is it going to be 50 grand to keep water out of it, or is it going to be 450?
Well, it already is 400. It's already earmarked for the Willows.
No, it's not
But
earmarked.
it's not in the budget. It's just in a fund. To put it in the budget, we have to put it in the budget, just like we do with the capital fund and the stormwater fund.
Yeah, technically that is correct.
Right, so
I mean, the alternative is when the board said 1.1 million to the Willows, it's there until the 1.1 million is spent, and those projects, can go in any given year. But by the letter of the appropriation law in our charter says every year that's got to be reappropriated. So,
So my sense is it's another placeholder year of 50 grand plus or minus for the Willows while we figure out what to do. And then if we take action in 17, that money can be used to do, then we would address that in 17.
That money could be repurposed in 2017.
Yeah.
If we do anything with that building, we're going to need that water line anyway. So it's really the paving of the road. Maybe you could reallocate. So it seems to me that money's already appropriated. That money is there for a purpose. The $50,000 in the budget would be just to maintain the shell of the building, and then any further decision on that building would be made in 17, paid for either with repurposed funds or with new funds.
All right, makes sense to me. Is there a consensus for that?
If that money is allocated right now for that, I see no reason to move it tonight. Certainly, if it remains in that budget and as that line item, that can be changed next year.
It's not in the budget, though.
No, I know, but it's earmarked for that. Is that the correct term for it, Bill?
Yeah.
It is set for that. So if we move it from there to someplace else, we're changing where that money originally was set for.
So we'll put zero in the budget for the Willows then.
No, I understand it may not be in the budget, but it is there, and it is earmarked for that purpose. Is that right? What is its status? No? Okay. You want to explain?
I think what you're asking for is to have 50,000 in the operating budget just to keep the heat on in that, to be able to keep
that's
that.
What
And
we're
that's not, that full amount is not in there. You're talking two separate things.
Right.
Okay.
With the 416 in one fund.
Right.
And you're talking about
So
this within the
what I'm
operating. So
talking
we have
about
to
is we
appropriate.
need to have enough operating revenue in the budget to let them do what they need to do in 17.
Okay, and what happens to the remainder of that money?
It stays in its current limbo state until we take action for
Well,
it.
we
it's gonna sit in the
reallocate
settlement
it or
fund, right?
continue the allocation.
Yes.
Stay there. Okay, so it's not being
So it's
repurposed
no, it's
in any way,
no
shape, or
action
form.
until the time comes.
Do you see it any other way, Elaine? Okay.
So really, how much-
Is 50 enough, is 50 enough to do what we need to do? I know, fix the roof, and you have flashing to deal with, and you have
How much is
other
in there
pieces
now,
of
Bill?
that.
Yeah, right now we've identified 27,000 between utilities, some contractual service. So the utilities is the 10,000, contractual services is 7, and then repair and maintenance at 10. So perhaps that needs to be a little bit higher.
I mean, I just saw a memo or an email from someone who was claiming that we need more money at hand to preserve it.
More than 27.
Yes.
Yeah. So is it likely to be in the 27 to 50? Maybe it'll be 27, but that's a detail that you can give us next time. The commitment from us is that it's essentially a placeholder amount of money.
That's fine.
That we're not going to commit large amounts to it in this budget.
50,000 is de minimis.
If the board's okay with it, what we can do is we could take the 10,000 that is in repair and maintenance now, bump that up to 50,000. There is enough cash in the fund to do that without adjusting or needing to go look for resources somewhere else, like the general
Okay.
fund.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Those expenses, if we have to do those with a contractor, are going to have to come to the board because they will exceed my spending limit, so it's going to have to come to the
Right.
board for approval anyhow.
So we have that. All right, so we have that motion? Did you make that motion, Don?
Yeah, I'll motion that the staff revise the budget and increase the amount of money available for the Willows by $50,000.
Okay, any more board discussion? Any public discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0. Thank you.
Move we adjourn.
Before you do, 30 seconds. First of all, I want to thank Bob and Bill and all your staff for putting these numbers together. I mean, the fact you have a great command of these numbers. I also want to thank Bob for doing the heavy lifting and the work to put together a semblance of a plan that ultimately became the plan for the library, and finding out where this could be. As probably you were the only ones, the two of you, to know where that money would be and how to do that. So I do want to thank you for putting that together and making a kind of a win-win solution, at least as we passed it as a board. And thanks for your work continuing on this budget. It's a several hundred-page document, and you guys do it well. So thank you, Bill, and your
Right,
staff. And your staff.
Without diminishing Don's motion at the beginning of the meeting, congratulating Elaine and commending her on her campaign, I would like to commend our state representative-elect Alex Charlton for a decent campaign and recognize that as a Board of Commissioners, we'll need his help and support for various projects in the next 2 years at least.
All right, Rich, you want to restate your motion?
Mr. Chairman, I do hereby move that this duly constituted meeting be adjourned.
Is there a second? Second. So we're adjourned. Thank you.